Welcome to the True Crime Chronicles. I am your narrator, your guide through the labyrinth of human darkness. Usually, we walk the rain-slicked streets of Los Angeles or the cold alleys of New York. But evil recognizes no borders. It does not carry a passport. It simply exists, waiting in the shadows of every city, in every corner of the Americas. Today, we drag our spotlight south, crossing the equator, deep into the heart of Argentina. We begin our descent with a case that proves that the devil often wears the most beautiful mask imaginable. The year is 1971. The location is the northern suburbs of Buenos Aires. It is a time of political instability, whispers of revolution, and the uneasy hum of a society on the brink of change. But in the quiet, tree-lined neighborhoods of Olivos and San Isidro, a different kind of threat is emerging. It is not a political radical or a desperate thief. It is a boy with a face that looks like it was carved from porcelain, framed by curls of golden hair and eyes that reflect the innocent blue of a summer sky. His name is Carlos Robledo Puig. To the neighbors, he is Carlitos, the polite, shy son of a hard-working Chevrolet executive. He plays the piano. He rides a motorbike. He speaks German and Spanish. He is the picture of the Argentine middle-class dream. But inside the mind of this 19-year-old, there is a hollow space where a conscience should exist. There is no empathy. There is no fear. There is only a terrifying, abysmal boredom that can only be cured by the rush of adrenaline and the scent of gunpowder. We are looking at the case of the Black Angel. This falls squarely into the realm of the psychological thriller. We must understand the disconnect. How does a young man, who has never known hunger or poverty, turn into a machine of destruction? It starts small, as these things always do. Petty theft, joyriding, breaking into hardware stores just to see if he can. But material possessions bore him. He does not steal for money. He steals for the power of taking. And soon, taking objects is not enough. He wants to take lives. Carlos finds a partner in crime, a schoolmate named Jorge Ibanez. Jorge is eager, malleable, and perhaps a little too desperate to impress the charismatic Carlitos. Together, they form a deadly duo, cruising the streets of Buenos Aires in stolen cars, looking for opportunities. They are not masterminds. They are not professional hitmen. They are chaotic forces of nature. They break into a spare parts shop in March of 1971. This is where the threshold is crossed. This is where the game turns into a slaughter. They enter the shop at night. The shadow of a watchman and his family looms in the back. A normal thief would run. A desperate thief might threaten. Carlos Robledo Puig does neither. He pulls out a ruby pistol and fires. He kills the watchman while the man sleeps. Then, with the casual indifference of someone swatting a fly, he kills the watchman's wife. There is no hesitation, no pulse spike. He walks over the bodies to rummage through the till. This is the defining moment. The angel has earned his wings, and they are dipped in blood. The spree that follows is a blur of senseless violence. In May, they target a nightclub called Enam. They break in, expecting an empty building. Instead, they find a maintenance man and a night watchman. Again, the solution for Robledo Puig is immediate and permanent. He shoots them both dead. But here is the detail that freezes the blood. After the murders, he does not flee in a panic. He does not vomit in disgust. He walks to the bar, pours himself a drink, and puts a record on the turntable. Imagine the scene. 2 fresh corpses cooling on the floor. The smell of cordite hanging in the stale air of a closed nightclub. And there, Bathed in the dim light is this beautiful boy with the golden curls, sipping a drink, tapping his foot to the music. It is a scene straight out of a noir nightmare, but it is entirely real. This absolute lack of effect is what terrifies the psychologist later. He is not angry. He is not vengeful. He is simply empty. He treats human beings like furniture that is in his way. As the months roll by, the body count rises. A supermarket, a car dealership. Each robbery ends in execution. The police are baffled. They are looking for a hardened gang, ex-convicts, men with scars and desperate histories. They are not looking for a baby-faced teenager who lives with his parents and does his homework. The press begins to panic. They call the unknown killer a beast, a monster. They have no idea that the monster looks like a cherub from a Renaissance painting. The relationship between Carlos and his partner Jorge begins to fray. Jorge is becoming nervous. The weight of the bodies is starting to crush him. He wants out. He talks about leaving, about stopping, but you do not walk away from the Black Angel. In August of 1971, the two are driving a stolen car. A crash occurs. The details are murky, lost to the twisted narrative Carlos would later spin. Jorge dies in the wreck. Carlos walks away without a scratch. Some say it was an accident. The forensics suggest otherwise. It is believed that Carlos Robledo Puig, sensing his partner's hesitation, sensing a loose end, engineered the crash, or perhaps finished him off in the confusion. He leaves his friend's body in the twisted metal and walks home. He is now alone. And surprisingly, without Jorge to anchor him, he does not stop. He accelerates. He finds a new partner, Hector Somoza, and the cycle of violence resets, faster and more brutal than before. We are approaching the climax of his reign of terror, but we must pause to consider the culture of the time. Argentina was a place of machismo, of strong authoritarian figures. A boy like Carlos, who looked so soft, so European, was invisible to the radar of law enforcement. He used his beauty as a camouflage. He would smile at police officers at checkpoints, and they would wave him through. His appearance was his greatest weapon, more dangerous than the pistols he carried in his waistband. By early 1972, the tally is horrific. 11 murders, 17 robberies, sexual abuse. The specific brutality against the women he encountered adds another layer of depravity to his profile. He is not just a thief who kills. He is a predator who takes pleasure in the total domination of his victims. He creates a world where he is the god, and everyone else is merely a prop in his personal theater of cruelty. But every god must fall. The downfall of the Black Angel comes from a moment of grotesque carelessness. It involves a hardware store, a blowtorch, and a betrayal so cold it rivals the ice in his veins. In February of 1972, Carlos and his new partner, Hector, rob a hardware store. During the heist, something goes wrong. Hector complicates things, and in that split second, Carlos decides that Hector is no longer useful. He shoots his partner dead. But he does not just leave the body. In a macabre attempt to hinder identification, he takes a blowtorch found in the shop and burns the face of his dead accomplice. It is a gruesome, messy, amateurish act. It is the act of a child playing with fire, unaware that the house is about to burn down around him. He flees the scene, leaving the charred remains of his partner and, crucially, his own identification card in Hector's pocket. The police find the body. They find the ID. The illusion shatters instantly. When the police arrive at the Robledo Puig household, they are expecting a mistake. They expect the father to say his son's ID was stolen. Instead, they find the evidence of a year-long nightmare. The arrest of Carlos Robledo Puig shocks the nation. The press photos of him in handcuffs, looking like a pouting child who has been denied a toy, become iconic images of Argentine criminal history. The trial of Carlos Robledo Puig was less of a legal proceeding and more of a national spectacle. The courtroom was packed with people desperate to see the monster, only to be confused by the sight of the boy. Throughout the proceedings, the Black Angel sat in the dock with an expression of utter boredom. He did not cry. He did not plead. When the judge read out the sentence of life imprisonment, the maximum penalty under Argentine law, Carlos turned to the court, his blue eyes cold and dead, and whispered a promise. He said, "Someday I am going to get out, and I am going to kill you all." He never got out. Today, he remains incarcerated, the longest-serving prisoner in the history of Argentina. He has become a relic, a ghost haunting the stone walls of the Sierra Chica prison. He is an old man now, his golden curls turned to grey, his angelic face ravaged by time and confinement. The story of Robledo Puig is terrifying because of its randomness. It was the lightning strike of a singular, distorted mind. It was the evil of the individual. But as we leave the cool, damp winters of Buenos Aires, we must prepare ourselves for a different kind of horror. We are traveling north now. We leave the urban sprawl and the European architecture behind. We cross the equator, flying over the dense jungles of the Amazon, past the crumbling ruins of ancient civilizations, until we land in the dusty, sun-scorched heartlands of Mexico. The year is 1964. The location is the state of Guanajuato. Here, the heat is a physical weight, pressing down on the dry earth. And here, evil is not a bored teenager with a gun. Evil is a family business. It is organized, it is profitable, and it is absolute. We are entering the domain of the González Valenzuela sisters, Delfina, Maria de Jesus, Carmen, and Maria Luisa. In the folklore of crime, they are known simply as Las Poquianchis. If Robledo Puig was a psychological thriller, this story is a survival horror. It is a descent into a hell so deep, so depraved, that it challenges the very definition of humanity. These women did not just kill, they enslaved. They built an empire of flesh and bone on the outskirts of a town called San Francisco del Rincon. Their headquarters was a ranch with a name that sounds like a cruel joke. It was called El Ángel del Silencio, the Angel of Silence. From the outside, it looked like a fortress. High walls kept the prying eyes of the villagers out, but more importantly, they kept the screams in. The sisters ran a network of brothels, but to call them brothels is to sanitize the reality. These were concentration camps disguised as cantinas. The women who worked there were not employees. They were prisoners, kidnapped or tricked from the poorest villages in rural Mexico. The modus operandi was sickeningly simple. The sisters, dressed in their Sunday best, posing as wealthy benefactors, would travel to remote hamlets. They would find young girls, often illiterate, starving, and desperate. They would promise them jobs as maids in the big city. They promised good wages, new clothes, and a chance to send money back to their struggling parents. It was a lie wrapped in the guise of charity. The moment the girls stepped into the car, their lives as free human beings were over. Once they arrived at the ranch, the indoctrination began. It was brutal and swift. The girls were beaten into submission. They were starved until their will broke. They were forced into prostitution, servicing the drunken men who came from neighboring towns. The sisters ruled with an iron fist and a leather whip. They had a hierarchy of cruelty. The sisters were the queens, and below them were the favored prisoners, women who had broken so completely that they became enforcers, beating their fellow captives to earn an extra scrap of bread. The environment at the ranch was designed to strip away identity. The girls lost their names. They became numbers, commodities to be used until they were broken. Disease was rampant. There was no medical care. If a girl became pregnant, the solution was a rusty coat hanger or a savage beating to induce a miscarriage. If a girl contracted syphilis, she was not treated. She was punished for damaging the merchandise. The air in the ranch smelled of stale alcohol, unwashed bodies, and fear. But the true horror of Las Poquianchis lies in the duration. This was not a spree that lasted a few months. This went on for years. The local authorities were often paid off with bribes of money and liquor. The police turned a blind eye. The politicians looked the other way. In this dusty corner of Mexico, the sisters were the law. They had money, and in a place of crushing poverty, money is the only god that listens. The villagers whispered rumors about the ranch, about the girls who went in and never came out. But fear kept their mouths shut. As the 1960s bled into the 70s, the sisters became more paranoid and more sadistic. The ranch became a closed loop of death. When a girl died from disease or a beating, they did not call the undertaker. They simply disposed of the body. Sometimes they buried them in the yard. Sometimes they burned them. The ranch was sitting on a literal graveyard of its own making. The soil of the Angel of Silence was fertilized with the blood of the innocent. The sisters justified their actions with a twisted form of religious delusion. They had a shrine in the ranch. They prayed to the saints. They believed that their wealth was a blessing from God, and that the girls were merely vessels provided for their prosperity. This cognitive dissonance is common in the darkest criminal minds. They compartmentalize. They can beat a girl to death in the morning and pray the rosary in the afternoon without missing a beat. It is a terrifying flexibility of the moral spine. The unraveling of this empire of dirt began with a mistake. It always does. In 1964, the sisters' cruelty finally outpaced their ability to bribe. A young girl managed to escape. She did not run home. She ran to the police in a neighboring state, far away from the sisters' sphere of influence. Her story was so horrific, so fantastical, that the authorities initially did not believe her. She spoke of cages, of babies buried in the garden, of women kept in dungeons. But the scars on her body told the truth. The raid that followed in January of 1964 revealed a scene that hardened police officers vomited at the sight of. They found 91 bodies buried on the property. 91. And those were just the ones they could find. They found survivors who looked like walking skeletons, their eyes hollowed out by years of abuse. The ranch was not just a brothel, it was a slaughterhouse. The arrest of the sisters was a national sensation. The Mexican press dubbed them the Poquianchis, a derogatory term that stuck. The photos of the sisters in custody show women who look like terrifying grandmothers. They are heavy-set, wearing somber dresses, their faces set in scowls of defiance. They did not look like monsters. They looked like the women who sold tortillas in the market. And that, perhaps, is the most frightening detail of all. We have seen the evil of the individual with Robledo Puch. We have seen the evil of the family with Las Poquianchis. But what happens when the evil is not just a family, but a religion? What happens when the justification for murder is not money or boredom, but a pact with the dark forces of the universe. We must prepare to leave the dusty plains of Guanajuato. We are heading to the borderlands, to the chaotic city of Matamoros. We are about to enter a world where drug trafficking meets black magic. We step out of the dusty archives of the 1960s and fast forward to the neon-soaked, drug-fueled haze of the late 1980s. We are standing on the edge of the Rio Grande, the winding river that scars the earth between the United States and Mexico. On the north bank lies Brownsville, Texas, a place of order and law. On the south bank lies Matamoros, a city that in 1989 was a playground for smugglers, corrupt federales, and college students looking for cheap tequila and a break from reality. It is March 1989. It is spring break. The air is filled with the sound of pop music and the roar of engines. Thousands of American students flood across the border, invincible in their youth, unaware that they are walking into a hunting ground. Among them is a young man named Mark Kilroy. He is 21 years old, a pre-med student at the University of Texas. He has bright eyes, an athletic build, and a future that shines like gold. He is the classic American son, the kind of boy who calls his mother on Sundays. Mark Kilroy is not a criminal. He is not a drug addict. He is simply a tourist in a land he does not understand. On the night of March 14th, he is celebrating with friends on the bustling streets of Matamoros. The tequila flows. The night blurs. In the chaos of the crowd, amidst the noise and the laughter, Mark steps away to find a bathroom, or perhaps just a breath of fresh air. He vanishes. He does not run away. He is snatched from the face of the earth as if by a phantom hand. His friends wait for him. They search the bars. They retrace their steps. But the morning sun rises over an empty street. Mark Kilroy is gone. The disappearance of a white, affluent American student triggers a firestorm. The American media descends on the border. Mark's parents, desperate and terrifyingly hopeful, walk the streets handing out flyers. The police on both sides of the border are under immense pressure. They assume it is a kidnapping for ransom, or perhaps a drug deal gone wrong. They are applying logic to a situation that has abandoned all reason. Weeks pass. The hope begins to curdle into dread. The search yields nothing but silence. But in the underworld, whispers are circulating. The local drug dealers are nervous. They are not afraid of the police. They are afraid of a specific group operating out of a remote ranch called Santa Elena. This group does not just move cocaine and marijuana. They move with a swagger, a terrifying confidence. They believe they are untouchable. They believe they are invisible. And they believe this because they have paid a price in blood. The breakthrough comes by accident, as it often does in the annals of true crime. In April, Mexican police run a routine drug interdiction checkpoint. A truck runs the blockade. The police give chase, leading them to the dusty gates of Rancho Santa Elena. They arrest a suspect, a low-level enforcer named Serafin Hernandez. During the interrogation, Serafin is strangely calm. He tells the officers that they cannot hurt him. He tells them that he is protected by a higher power. He speaks of a cauldron. He speaks of El Padrino. The police raid the ranch. They expect to find bales of marijuana. They find them. But then, the smell hits them. It is a stench that defies description, a mix of iron, rot, and burnt hair. In a shed near the main house, they find the source. It is a large iron cauldron and nganga. Inside, they find a stew of nightmares. It is filled with blood, animal carcasses, heavy sticks, spices, and human bones. A human brain floats in the mixture. It is a ritual altar of the Palo Mayombe religion, twisted into something unrecognizable. This is not just a drug cartel. This is a cult. The leader is a man named Adolfo de Jesus Constanzo. They call him El Padrino, the Godfather. Born in Miami to a Cuban mother, Constanzo is handsome, charismatic, and utterly insane. He is a practitioner of a dark, bastardized version of Palo Mayombe. He has convinced his followers, a group of drug traffickers and wayward souls, that human sacrifice is the key to invincibility. He preaches that by feeding the Nganga with the screams and souls of the tortured, they will be invisible to the police and bulletproof in battle. The interrogation of the cult members reveals the horrific fate of Mark Kilroy. He was not taken for money. He was taken because Constanzo needed a brain. He needed the intelligence, the vitality of a smart young man to feed his cauldron, to make his spell stronger. They describe how they kidnapped Mark, how they took him to the ranch. They describe his final hours with a clinical detachment that chills the seasoned detectives to the bone. Mark Kilroy died screaming, sacrificed on the altar of a delusional narcissist's ego. But Mark was not the only one. As the police begin to dig up the grounds of Rancho Santa Elena, the horror multiplies. One body becomes two becomes five becomes 12. In total, 15 bodies are unearthed from the dry soil. Some are rival drug dealers, some are thieves, some are just unlucky strangers who crossed the path of the narco-satanicos. All of them were tortured. All of them were mutilated. Their deaths were not quick. They were prolonged rituals designed to extract the maximum amount of pain, which Constanzo believed was the energy that fed his magic. The hunt for Adolfo Constanzo begins. He is not at the ranch. He has fled to Mexico City with his inner circle, including his high priestess, a seemingly normal college student named Sara Aldrete, dubbed La Madrina. The chase is frantic. The authorities are dealing with a man who believes he is a god, a man who has nothing to lose. The media dubs them the narco-satanicos. The public is gripped by a satanic panic. The idea that a handsome man in a suit could be boiling people in a cauldron shatters the psyche of the nation. We are deep in the territory of the why. Why does a man like Constanzo exist? Psychologists point to his childhood, to his mother who was a practitioner of Santeria, to his exposure to the occult at a young age. But millions of people practice these religions peacefully. Constanzo was different. He was a sociopath who used religion as a tool for control. He discovered that fear was the ultimate currency. If he could make his men believe he had the power of the devil, they would do anything for him. They would kill for him. They would die for him. The endgame plays out in a sweltering apartment building in Mexico City. It is May 1989. The police have tracked Constanzo down. He is cornered. He has his weapons, his money, and his followers. But his magic has failed him. The police are outside. The bullets are real. Realizing that the shield of invisibility is a lie, Constanzo makes a final, desperate command. He orders one of his followers to shoot him. He chooses death over capture. He chooses to die as the Godfather, rather than rot in a cage as a man. When the police storm the apartment, they find the body of the monster. Adolfo Constanzo is dead. The spell is broken. But the legacy of the narco-satanicos lingers. It introduced the world to the concept of narco-occultism, a terrifying hybrid of drug violence and magical thinking that would infect the cartels for decades to come. It showed us that in the war on drugs, the enemy is not just fighting for territory. Sometimes They are fighting for their souls. We leave the blood-stained soil of Matamoros. We leave the cauldron and the madness of the cult. We have seen the individual killer, the family killers, and the cult killers. But now, we must scale up. We must look at what happens when a criminal organization becomes more powerful than the state itself. We are traveling south to the lush green mountains of Colombia. We are going to a place where cocaine is king and one man wears the crown. The transition here is stark. We move from the hidden, secretive horror of a cult shed to the explosive, public terror of a nation under siege. We are no longer looking for bodies buried in a ranch. We are looking at bodies scattered across city streets by car bombs. We are about to meet the man who made the world tremble, the man who burned millions of dollars just to keep his daughter warm. We are entering the era of the king of cocaine. We have arrived in Medellin, Colombia, the city of eternal spring. The air here is sweet with the scent of orchids and heavy with the humidity of the Andes. But in the late 1980s and early 1990s, this paradise is a war zone. We are not dealing with a serial killer hiding in the shadows. We are dealing with a man who declared war on the state, a man who put a price on the head of every police officer, a man who turned a country into a slaughterhouse. We are looking at the architect of narco-terrorism, Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria. This is the countdown. In the world of Pablo Escobar, time is not measured in hours or minutes. It is measured in detonations. It is measured in the brief, terrifying silence between the click of a trigger and the explosion of a car bomb. For the people of Colombia, life has become a game of Russian roulette. You walk to the market, tick-tock. You drive to work, tick-tock. Will the car next to you explode? Will the shopping mall crumble? This is the terror of living under the thumb of El Patron. To understand the scale, we must look at the year 1989. It is the bloodiest year in Colombian history. Pablo is fighting against extradition to the United States. His motto is simple and chilling: better a grave in Colombia than a jail cell in the United States. To prove his point, he unleashes a wave of violence that defies comprehension. He does not target just his enemies. He targets the very fabric of society: judges, politicians, journalists, innocent bystanders. No one is safe. Let us focus on a single, heart-stopping sequence. It is November 27th, 1989. At the El Dorado International Airport in Bogota, Avianca Flight 203 is preparing for takeoff. On board are 107 souls, families, businessmen, crew members. They are buckling their seatbelts, checking their watches, thinking about their destination in Cali. Unbeknownst to them, a young man, a Suizo, is sitting in seat 15F. He has been paid a small fortune to press a button on a tape recorder when the plane reaches a certain altitude. He thinks he is recording a conversation. He is wrong. 7:23 in the morning. The plane is climbing. The engines roar. The city of Bogota shrinks below them. The assassin presses the button. He expects a click. Instead, he triggers a charge of plastic explosive hidden under his seat. The explosion rips the airliner apart in mid-air. Bodies, luggage, and burning metal rain down over the municipality of Soacha. 107 people die instantly. 3 people on the ground are killed by the falling debris. Why? Why this senseless slaughter? Because Pablo Escobar believed that a presidential candidate, Cesar Gaviria, was on that flight. He was willing to kill 110 innocent people just to eliminate one political rival. But here is the punchline of this tragedy. Gaviria was not on the plane. His security team had advised him not to travel. The target missed. The innocents died. And Pablo? He simply shrugged. In his mind, it was a necessary tactical error, collateral damage in a war of attrition. The clock keeps ticking. Less than 2 weeks later, December 6th, 1989. It is the morning rush hour. A bus packed with 500 kilograms of dynamite is parked in front of the DAS building, the headquarters of the Colombian secret police. At 7:32 in the morning, the bus detonates. The blast is so powerful, it creates a crater in the street. Windows shatter for blocks. The building is gutted. 63 people are dead. Over 600 are wounded. The city of Bogotá looks like London during the Blitz. This is the power of the Medellin cartel. They have infinite money. They have infinite ruthlessness. They can buy armies, they can buy politicians, and if they cannot buy you, they will kill you. The government is on its knees. They are fighting a hydra. Every time they cut off a head, another bomb goes off. The pressure is suffocating. The public is screaming for peace, for safety, for an end to the madness. In 1991, the countdown pauses. The government blinks. A new constitution is written, banning the extradition of Colombian nationals. Pablo has won. He surrenders, but on his own terms. He builds his own prison, La Catedral, overlooking the city of Medellin. It is not a prison, it is a fortress of luxury. It has a soccer field, a bar, a jacuzzi, and a waterfall. He invites professional soccer players to play matches. He holds parties. He continues to run his empire from the comfort of his private resort, protected by his own guards. But the ego of a king is a fragile thing. Inside La Catedral, Pablo becomes paranoid. He suspects his lieutenants of stealing from him. He has them brought to the prison. There, in the safety of his sanctuary, he has them tortured and killed. The screams echo off the walls of his golden cage. This is the breaking point. The government cannot ignore murder committed inside a prison. They decide to move him to a real jail. July 22nd, 1992. The military surrounds La Catedral, but the bird has flown. Pablo walks out the back door, into the fog of the forest, and disappears. The countdown restarts, but this time the clock is ticking for him. He is no longer the untouchable king. He is the most hunted man on earth. The search block, a special unit of the Colombian police, is tracking him. The DEA is tracking him. And a shadowy group called Los Pepes, people persecuted by Pablo Escobar, is hunting him, killing his lawyers, his accountants, his family members. The hunter has become the prey. The net tightens. The mighty Pablo Escobar, who once burned $2 million in cash to keep his daughter warm while they were on the run, is now reduced to hiding in middle-class safe houses, eating takeout food, terrified of using the phone. Every call he makes is a risk. Every second on the line is a triangulation point for the electronic ears listening in the sky. December 2nd, 1993. It is the day after his 44th birthday. He is hiding in a nondescript house in the Los Olivos neighborhood of Medellin. He makes a mistake. He stays on the phone too long with his son. He is trying to be a father, trying to maintain a connection. But that connection is his death warrant. The search block triangulates the signal. They are close. They are at the door. The breach is explosive. The door crashes open. Gunfire erupts. Pablo, the man who held a nation hostage, the man who ordered the deaths of thousands, scrambles out a window onto the terracotta roof. He is barefoot. He is overweight. He is desperate. He is running across the tiles, pistol in hand, looking for an escape that does not exist. Pop, pop, pop. The shots ring out in the afternoon sun. A bullet strikes him in the leg, another in the torso, and then the fatal shot. A bullet enters through his ear, extinguishing the lights in the mind of the drug lord. Pablo Escobar collapses on the roof. The king is dead. The image of the police officers posing over his bloody body, smiling like big game hunters, is beamed around the world. The countdown has reached 0. The silence that follows is deafening. The bombs stop. The city exhales, but the scar remains. The story of Pablo Escobar is not just a crime story. It is a tragedy of a nation. It shows us the terrifying power of unlimited wealth combined with zero morality. It shows us how fragile civilization is when confronted with a man who does not play by the rules. But as the smoke clears over Medellin, we must remember that monsters do not always look like wealthy drug lords. Sometimes they look like drifters. Sometimes they are invisible, not because they are powerful, but because their victims are the ones society has forgotten. We are leaving the high-stakes world of international terrorism. We are going back to the intimate, personal horror of the hunt. We are traveling south again, crossing the border into Ecuador. We are entering the domain of a man who makes Pablo Escobar look like a businessman. We are about to meet a creature who prowled the Andes, preying on the most innocent, the most vulnerable. He did not use bombs. He used his hands. He is the monster of the Andes, and his body count makes the blood run cold. We leave the shattered glass and burning streets of Medellin behind. The roar of car bombs fades into the distance, replaced by a silence that is far more unsettling. We are traveling high into the Andes mountains, where the air is thin and cold. The landscape here is breathtaking. Vast stretches of green valleys, mist clinging to the jagged peaks, and the ancient, quiet rhythm of indigenous life. But do not let the beauty fool you. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, these mountains hid a predator who makes Pablo Escobar look like a politician. We are entering the territory of the hunt. This is not a story about money or power. It is a story about opportunity and the terrifying anonymity of the drifter. Our subject is a man with no fixed address, no bank account, and no friends. He is a ghost who moved between Peru, Colombia, and Ecuador. To the people he passed on the road, he was a beggar, a nobody. But in the dark annals of crime, he is known as the Monster of the Andes. His name is Pedro Alonso Lopez. Born in Colombia in 1948, Lopez was an unwanted child. His mother, a prostitute, threw him out onto the streets when he was just a boy. He grew up in the hard, unforgiving school of the gutter. He was abused, beaten, and discarded by society before he even hit puberty. In prison, as a young man, he was subjected to brutal sexual violence, and it was there, in the darkness of a cell, that the victim died and the monster was born. He made a vow. He would never be the victim again. He would be the god of his own twisted world. When he was released, he began to wander. He drifted across the borders of South America, a shadow moving through the high grass. His targets were not drug lords or policemen. They were the most vulnerable members of society, young girls, often from indigenous communities, often poor, often unattended. They were the invisible children of the Andes. Lopez knew that if a peasant girl went missing in a remote market, the police would not launch a manhunt. They would assume she ran away. They would assume she was lost. He banked on this apathy. His hunting ground was the bustling, chaotic markets of Ecuador. Imagine the scene. It is market day in the city of Ambato. The plaza is a riot of color. Women in traditional ponchos are selling potatoes, corn, and textiles. The air smells of roasted pork and damp wool. Children are running everywhere, playing hide-and-seek between the stalls. And there, sitting quietly on a crate, is Pedro Lopez. He does not look dangerous. He looks like a vagrant, perhaps a bit disheveled, wearing old clothes. He watches. He waits. He has the patience of a spider. He spots a girl, maybe 9 or 10 years old, separated from her mother for just a moment. He approaches her. He is soft-spoken. He is gentle. He offers a small trinket, a few coins, or perhaps he pretends to be a helpless traveler who needs directions. He plays on their innocence, on their cultural upbringing, to respect their elders. "Can you help me carry this?" he asks. "I have a present for my daughter. She is just your size." The moment the girl steps away from the safety of the crowd, the trap snaps shut. He leads them away from the market, down the winding dirt paths, into the eucalyptus groves that line the ravines. The transition is sudden. One moment, they are in the noise of the market. The next, they are alone in the twilight with a monster. It is here that the mask drops. The gentle beggar vanishes, and the sadist emerges. Lopez did not use weapons. He did not carry a gun or a knife. He used his hands. He wanted the intimacy of the kill. He wanted to see the light go out in their eyes. He would later tell journalists that he loved the look of terror on their faces, the realization that they were going to die. He strangled them. It was a slow, brutal process, and after they were dead, he would violate their bodies, taking a final sickening possession of the life he had stolen. For years, this went on. 1978, 1979, the number of missing girls began to rise, but they were scattered across different villages, different provinces. The police did not connect the dots. There was no central database, no DNA profiling. Just grieving mothers wandering the police stations, holding crumpled photographs, asking if anyone had seen their daughters. The authorities shrugged. "She probably went to the city to find work," they would say. But the earth keeps score. In 1980, the rains came. A massive flash flood tore through the ravines near the city of Ambato. The water washed away the topsoil, exposing the secrets that Lopez had buried. When the waters receded, the villagers made a horrifying discovery. Bones, skulls. The remains of 4 young girls were protruding from the mud. The police were finally forced to look. They started digging. The arrest of Pedro Lopez is one of the most ironic moments in criminal history. He was not caught by a brilliant detective. He was not caught by a SWAT team. He was caught by the very women he preyed upon. In a market in 1980, he tried to lure a young girl. But this time, the girl's mother saw him. She screamed. The market women, fierce and protective, surrounded him. They did not have handcuffs. They had their bare hands. They beat him. They held him down until the police arrived. At first, the police thought he was just a petty child molester. They had no idea they had captured the devil. But during the interrogation, Lopez was surprisingly calm. He was arrogant. He looked at the detectives with contempt. "You have no idea," he seemed to say. When a priest was brought in to talk to him, Lopez broke his silence. He did not confess to save his soul. He confessed to brag. He told them he had killed 110 girls in Ecuador alone. The police laughed. They thought he was crazy. "Prove it," they said. Lopez stood up. "Take me to the fields," he said. And so began the tour of horror. He led the police to a ravine near Ambato. He pointed to a spot of ground that looked like any other. "Dig there," he said. They dug. They found a body. He walked 10 yards. "Dig there." Another body. The police stopped laughing. The mood shifted to absolute dread. Over the next few days, Pedro Lopez led them to grave after grave. In one single field, they unearthed 53 bodies. The sheer scale of the carnage was impossible to process. The forensic teams ran out of body bags. The smell of death hung over the valley for weeks. And Lopez. He watched it all with a detached curiosity, as if he were a gardener showing off his work. But the horror was not contained to Ecuador. He told them about his time in Peru. He claimed another 100 victims there. He spoke of Colombia, another 100. The final tally, according to his own confession, was over 300 young girls. 300 lives extinguished by one man. 300 families destroyed. If his count is true, Pedro Lopez is one of the most prolific serial killers in recorded history. We must pause here to understand the psychology of the why. Why did he do it? Lopez claimed he was on a mission. He called himself the monster of the Andes with pride. He viewed himself as a force of nature, a cleanser. He claimed that the girls he killed were neglected, that their parents did not love them enough to watch them. In his twisted logic, he was punishing the society that had rejected him. "I lost my innocence at childhood," he said, "so I decided to take theirs." The media descended on Ecuador. Ron Leitner, a famous journalist, interviewed Lopez in his cell. He described a man who was chillingly articulate, a man who spoke of murder as if it were a business transaction. Lopez described the beauty of the kill, the feeling of absolute power. He showed no remorse, not a flicker. The only emotion he showed was a resentment that his mission had been interrupted. But the true horror of the Pedro Lopez story is not the murders. It is the ending. In the United States, a man like this would get the electric chair or life without parole. But in Ecuador in 1980, the maximum sentence for any crime, no matter how heinous, was 16 years. 16 years. That was the limit of the law. The judge had no choice. He sentenced the monster of the Andes to the maximum penalty. The clock began to tick again, but this time it was counting down to his release. The people of Ecuador were outraged. The mothers of the victims screamed for justice. But the law is a cold machine. Lopez served his time. He was a model prisoner. He read the Bible. He stayed quiet. And as the calendar pages turned, the year 1998 approached. The year 1998 arrived. For the families of the victims in Ecuador, it was a year of dread. The calendar on the wall was no longer a tool for tracking time. It was a countdown to a nightmare. Pedro Alonso Lopez, the man who had confessed to extinguishing over 300 lives, walked out of prison. He was released 2 years early for good behavior. It is a phrase that chokes the throat. Good behavior from a man who strangled children. Upon his release, the Ecuadorian government did the only thing they could think of. They deported him. They put the monster of the Andes on a bus and sent him back to his home country of Colombia. He crossed the border, a free man. He registered with the authorities in Colombia, but there were no outstanding warrants for him there at the time. The legal systems of South America were disjointed, slow, and bureaucratic. He slipped through the cracks, and then he vanished. In 1999, Pedro Alonso Lopez failed to check in with his parole officer. He simply walked away. Today, as you listen to this, the monster of the Andes is technically a free man. His whereabouts are unknown. Is he dead in a ditch somewhere? Or is he an old man sitting on a park bench in Bogotá, watching the children play, smiling at a secret that only he knows? The uncertainty is a horror story that has no ending. We leave the ghost of Lopez in the wind. We must now turn our faces to the final darkness. We have descended through the circles of hell, from the sociopathic greed of the cartels to the cold predation of the monster. But we have not yet hit the bottom. There is one more level, one more name, a name that causes seasoned detectives to weep, a name that represents the absolute nadir of the human soul. We remain in Colombia. The 1990s are drawing to a close. The country is exhausted from the war with Pablo Escobar. The people want peace. They want to believe that the worst is over. But in the shadows of the coffee plantations, in the ravines of the Valle del Cauca, something else is hunting. It is not a ghost. It is a machine of destruction. We are about to meet Luis Alfredo Garavito. They call him La Bestia, the Beast. If Pedro Lopez was a drifter who seized opportunity, Luis Garavito was a master strategist of death. He did not look like a monster. He did not have the wild eyes of a madman. He looked like your neighbor. He looked like a weary traveler. He often dressed as a monk, a priest, or a charity worker. He carried a small notebook and a bag of candy. He wore a mask of absolute benevolence. Garavito targeted the poorest of the poor. He looked for the street children, the boys displaced by the Civil War, the ones trying to earn a few pesos, selling lottery tickets or shining shoes. He would approach them with a smile. He would offer them a soda. He would tell them he worked for a foundation that helped children. He would promise them a job, a meal, a future. He spoke their language. He knew their hunger because he had once been one of them. His killing spree was not a random series of events. It was a 5-year campaign of genocide against the children of Colombia. He moved methodically from town to town, Pereira, Armenia, Tunja, Genoa. He kept a log. He tracked his movements. He treated murder with the precision of an accountant. He would lure the boys into the tall grass, into the vast sugarcane fields, where the stalks grew higher than a man's head. Once they were in the fields, the monk vanished. The charity worker dissolved. The beast emerged. The violence he inflicted is indescribable. We will not dwell on the gore, but you must understand the sadism. He kept them alive for hours, sometimes days. He tortured them. He bound them. He drank while he watched them suffer. It was a ritual of total domination. And when he was done, he would leave their small, broken bodies in the dirt and walk back to town to buy a beer. For years, the disappearances went unnoticed. These were the throwaway children of a war-torn country. Society looked through them. If a street urchin vanished, people assumed he had hopped a freight train to another city. Garavito thrived on this invisibility. He was the shark swimming in a sea of apathy. He killed and killed and killed, and the world did not blink. But the sheer volume of the dead began to clog the machinery of silence. By late 1997, the bodies began to surface. A skull found by a farmer, a rib cage found by a construction worker, then a mass grave. In the municipality of Genoa, the police found the remains of several boys in a small area. The pattern was undeniable. The cuts on the bones, the bindings, the decapitations. It was the work of a single hand. A task force was formed, but they had no leads, no witnesses, just a phantom who offered candy and death. They needed a break. They needed the beast to make a mistake. And like all narcissists, Garavito eventually believed he was invincible. He began to get sloppy. He began to leave traces. He began to taunt the very darkness that created him. The net was tightening, but it was made of gossamer threads, rumors, shadows, and the fading memories of traumatized witnesses. The task force, a dedicated group of investigators from the Technical Investigation Corps, or CTI, was running on fumes. They were chasing a phantom across the jagged topography of Colombia. They knew his profile, a man who blended in, a man who preyed on the invisible. But they needed a face. They needed a name. And in April of 1999, in the sweltering heat of Villavicencio, the beast finally stepped into the light. It happened on a quiet afternoon. The date was April 22nd. The sun was hammering down on the dusty streets. A homeless man, a figure usually ignored by society, saw something that made his skin crawl. He saw a man leading a young boy towards a desolate, overgrown area near the edge of town. The man looked disheveled, weary, like a vagabond. But there was something in his grip, something in the urgency of his stride, that set off an alarm in the witness's mind. The homeless man alerted a nearby shopkeeper. They followed. They intervened. It was a moment of mundane heroism that changed the course of history. When the police arrived, they found a man who looked terrified, claiming he was innocent, claiming he was just taking a walk. He gave a fake name. He played the role of the victim perfectly. But the police found something in his pocket that shattered his alibi. It was not a weapon. It was a pair of glasses. Why were the glasses important? Because weeks earlier, in a ravine filled with death, investigators had found a small prescription receipt. It was a tiny scrap of paper, weathered by the rain, but it bore a name and a prescription strength. The glasses in the suspect's pocket matched the description. The police did not know the magnitude of what they had found, but they knew they had a liar in custody. They detained him on a charge of attempted rape. They had no idea they had just handcuffed the most prolific serial killer in the Western Hemisphere. The interrogation began. At first, the man was defiant. He spun webs of lies. He claimed insanity. He claimed mistaken identity. He was a chameleon, shifting his persona from a confused simpleton to an indignant victim. But the investigators were relentless. They began to dig into his past. They found inconsistencies. They found a history of travel that matched the timeline of the bodies found across the country. The map on the wall, covered in red pins, began to align with the movements of this singular, unassuming man. Then came the breakthrough. A search of his belongings revealed a small, battered notebook. It looked like the diary of a madman. It was filled with scribbles, doodles, and what appeared to be a code. There were lists, tally marks, references to little ones, and locations. It was a ledger of death. Garavito had been keeping score. Like a diligent clerk in a slaughterhouse, he had recorded his atrocities. He documented the dates, the towns, and sometimes the specific tortures he had inflicted. The investigators sat across from him, the notebook on the table between them. The air in the room was heavy, suffocating. They began to read the entries aloud. They matched the dates in the book to the dates of the bodies found in the sugarcane fields. The silence of the suspect grew louder. The facade began to crack. The poor monk persona dissolved, revealing the cold reptilian stare of the predator beneath. Finally, the dam broke. Luis Alfredo Garavito looked at the detectives and asked for a soda. He asked for a cigarette. And then he began to talk. He did not stop for hours. He confessed to the murder of the boy in Villavicencio, then the boys in Pereira, then the boys in Armenia. The numbers climbed. 10, 20, 50, 100. The detectives stopped writing. They just listened in horrified silence as the magnitude of the horror washed over them. He spoke with a chilling detachment. He described the pleading of the children. He described how he gained their trust. He described the urge, a dark hunger that he claimed possessed him, a voice that told him to kill. He called himself the Beast, acknowledging the dual nature of his existence. He claimed that when the beast took over, he was merely a passenger in his own body. It was a classic dissociation, a psychological shield to protect himself from the reality of his own evil. But the confession was only words until they could prove it. Garavito offered to show them the graves. Thus began the tour of horror. For weeks, heavily guarded convoys moved through the Colombian countryside. Garavito, wearing a bulletproof vest and surrounded by armed guards to protect him from the lynch mobs that gathered in every town, led the police to the dumping grounds. He would walk into a field of tall grass, pause, sniff the air like an animal, and point. "There," he would say, "2 of them." The forensic teams would dig, and they would find them. Skeletal remains, rotted clothing, toys. The landscape of Colombia, usually so vibrant and full of life, was revealed to be a vast cemetery. The sheer scale was numbing. In one location alone, they found the remains of 23 children. The country went into shock. Television screens were filled with images of the forensic tents, the grieving mothers, and the small white coffins being carried out of the jungle. The Genova monster, as the press had dubbed the unknown killer, was now flesh and blood. He was a man named Luis. He was 5 feet 7 inches tall. He had a mustache. He looked like anyone. And that was the terror. During the investigations, a terrifying pattern emerged regarding the why. Garavito wasn't just killing for pleasure. He was killing to enact a twisted revenge on his own childhood. He saw himself in these boys, poor, neglected, vulnerable. By destroying them, he was destroying the weak child he once was. It was a suicidal loop projected outward onto the innocent. He was trying to kill his own past, one body at a time. As the body count surpassed 140 confirmed victims, a grim realization settled over the legal team. The laws of Colombia were not designed for this. There was no death penalty. There was no life without parole. The maximum sentence for murder was 40 years. But with cooperation, confession, and good behavior, that number could be slashed. The same legal loopholes that had released the monster of the Andes were now waiting to embrace the beast. The prosecutors scrambled. They tried to stack the charges. They charged him with homicide, kidnapping, torture, and falsification of documents. They wanted to ensure he would never breathe free air again. But the ghost of the legal code loomed large. Garavito knew the law. He had studied it. He knew that his confession was his bargaining chip. He traded the location of the bodies for leniency. It was a deal made with the devil, but the families needed closure. They needed the bones of their sons to bury. In the courtroom, Garavito sat with his head bowed, occasionally weeping fake tears, occasionally looking bored. When asked if he repented, he would give rehearsed answers about finding God, about forgiveness. It was a performance. The psychologists who examined him saw through it. They saw a psychopath incapable of remorse, a man who viewed his trial as just another stage on which to perform. The final tally of his victims remains a subject of debate. He confessed to 147 murders. Investigators believe the true number could be over 300. Maps of his travels suggest there are still graves out there, hidden in the deep ravines, marked only by the silence of the wind. The trial of Luis Alfredo Garavito was a collision between the infinite cruelty of a monster and the finite limits of human law. The prosecutors stood before the judge, armed with stacks of files that reached the ceiling. Each file was a name. Each name was a child. The final charge sheet was a document of horror that listed 138 counts of murder. The prosecution asked for the maximum penalty for each count. When the judge did the math, the total sentence amounted to 1,853 years in prison. It was a number that sounded biblical. It was a sentence meant to bury the beast under the weight of his own sins. 1,853 years. In any other country, this would mean that Garavito would die in a concrete box, his bones turning to dust long before his sentence was up. But this was Colombia in the late 1990s. The penal code was written with a focus on rehabilitation, not retribution. And in the fine print of the law, there was a clause that capped the maximum time served. No matter how many centuries the judge imposed, the law stated that no prisoner could be held for more than 40 years. The sentence was symbolic. The reality was a maximum of 4 decades. But the nightmare did not stop there. The Colombian legal system offered generous reductions for confession, for cooperation with authorities, and for work and study while incarcerated. The beast, who was as cunning as he was cruel, knew this. He had calculated his confession as a transaction. He traded the location of the graves for time. When the final calculations were done, experts estimated that with good behavior, Luis Garavito could theoretically walk free in as little as 22 years. The public gasp was audible. The families of the victims were apoplectic. A man who had slaughtered a village worth of children could be walking the streets again by the year 2021 or 2022. The math of justice felt like a slap in the face to the grieving mothers who had only just received the bones of their sons. Inside the high-security wing of the Tramacua prison in Valledupar, Garavito settled into his new life. He did not act like a man crushing under the guilt of genocide. He acted like a celebrity. Journalists flocked to interview him. He granted interviews with a strange mix of arrogance and faux humility. He would sit there, clean-shaven, holding a Bible, and talk about how he had been chosen by God to reveal the darkness of the world. He began to write a book. He aspired to be a politician. The psychology here is fascinating and repulsive. Garavito thrived on the attention. In the outside world, he was a nobody, a drifter, a man invisible to the elites. In prison, he was the center of the universe. He received letters. He had an audience. He manipulated the media just as he had manipulated the children with candy. He played the role of the reformed sinner, claiming that the beast was gone, exorcised by prayer and discipline. But those who looked into his eyes saw the same cold, dead shark gaze that had terrified the boys in the sugarcane fields. Let us compare him to Pedro Lopez, the monster of the Andes. Lopez was released and vanished. The fear that Garavito would follow the same path became a national obsession in Colombia. Every few years, rumors would swirl that his release was imminent. Protests would erupt outside the prison. The government was forced to constantly look for new legal avenues to keep him locked up, finding old unresolved cases to tack onto his sentence, desperately trying to keep the gate of the cage bolted shut. But beyond the legal drama, Garavito's case forced a mirror onto South American society. How did a man kill nearly 200 children without anyone noticing? The answer was a painful indictment of poverty. These children were the disposable ones. They were the street kids, the runaways, the poor. Garavito was a scavenger who fed on the negligence of the state. He proved that in a society torn apart by civil war and economic disparity, the most dangerous weapon is not a gun, but indifference. As the years in prison rolled on, Garavito began to rot. Not metaphorically, but physically. He developed leukemia. He developed eye cancer. In recent photos, he looks like a withered ghoul, wearing an eye patch, his body frail and broken. Some say it is divine justice, a slow, painful decay for a man who inflicted so much pain. He died in prison in October 2023, taking his final secrets to the grave. But the scar he left is permanent. We have now traversed the stories of 6 distinct horrors. We have seen the indifference of Robledo Puig, the slavery of Las Poquianchis, the cult madness of Constanzo, the terrorism of Escobar, the wandering predation of Lopez, and the industrial slaughter of Garavito. We have established the roster of monsters. But to truly understand the true crime chronicles, we cannot just list their crimes. We must understand the ecosystem that connected them. We need to go deeper. We need to rewind the clock and look at the soldiers of this war. We have talked about the generals like Escobar and the lone wolves like Garavito. But what about the army? What about the thousands of young men who were turned into killing machines? We are going to pivot back to Medellin. We are going to look at the sicarios. We are going to explore the school of assassins that Pablo Escobar built. This is the bridge between the poverty of Garavito's victims and the violence of Escobar's empire. Both groups were drawn from the same slums. One group became victims, the other became executioners. To understand the true darkness of the Latin American crime wave, we must walk into the barrios of Medellin in the 1980s. We must meet the teenage boys who prayed to the Virgin Mary before they went out to kill. We are entering the chapter of the children of the gun. It is a story of how innocence is weaponized. It is a story of motorcycles, Uzis, and the desperate belief that it is better to live 5 years as a king than 50 years as an ox. The transition is from the silence of the grave to the roar of the motorcycle engine. The hunt continues, but now the hunters are children. We are back in Medellin, but we are not in the luxurious prison of La Catedral. We are in the communes, the shanty towns that cling to the steep mountainsides like a disease. To understand the violence of the 1980s and 90s, you cannot just look at the capo. You must look at the soldiers. You must look at the sicarios. These were not hardened ex-military men. These were children, boys of 13, 14, 15 years old. They were the disposable infantry in Pablo Escobar's war against the state. The geography of Medellin tells the story. In the valley, you have the skyscrapers, the banks, the red brick apartment buildings of the wealthy. But look up, high on the slopes, where the roads turn to dirt and the houses are made of scrap wood and hollow bricks, lives the army. This is the breeding ground of the hitman. In these neighborhoods, a boy has 2 choices. He can work in a factory for pennies, invisible and disrespected, or he can pick up a gun, ride a Yamaha motorcycle, and become a king for a day. The culture of the sicario is a fascinating, terrifying blend of nihilism and intense Catholicism. Before a hit, these boys would not drink or take drugs to dull their nerves. They would go to church, specifically the Shrine of Mary Help of Christians in Sabaneta. Imagine a church packed with teenage killers, lighting candles, kneeling on the stone floor. They did not pray for forgiveness. They prayed for aim. They prayed that their bullets would fly true and that they would not suffer. They asked the Virgin to bless their weapons. This spiritual paradox is central to the Latin American noir. How does a boy kill a judge in the morning and pray to the Mother of God in the afternoon? It is because, in their world, God is not a judge of morality. God is a protector of the tribe. They viewed themselves as soldiers in a holy war for survival. The money they earned from a hit, maybe a few $1,000s, a fortune to them, went to buy a fridge for their mother, a tombstone for their brother, or a new motorcycle to carry them to the next job. The weapon of choice was the submachine gun, often a mini Uzi or an Ingram, but the true weapon was the motorcycle. The tactic was simple and devastatingly effective. 2 boys on a bike. The driver, the pilot, weaves through the heavy traffic of Medellin. The shooter on the back spots the target, a police car, a politician's limousine. They pull up alongside. The window rolls down. The burst of fire is deafening and brief. Then the throttle twists, and they vanish into the labyrinth of the city streets. During the height of Escobar's bounty system, the police were the primary targets. Pablo offered a fixed price for every dead cop. It turned the city into a hunting ground where law enforcement officers were the prey. Police officers stopped wearing uniforms. They stopped patrolling alone. They lived in terror of every motorcycle engine they heard. For the sicarios, killing a cop was a rite of passage. It was a payday. It was a way to earn respect in a world that offered them none. Let us zoom in on one archetypal figure. Let us call him El Chino. He is 16. He wears expensive sneakers, imported jeans, and a escapulario, a religious scapula, around his neck. He knows he will not live to see 20. He accepts this. In fact, he embraces it. The motto of his generation is no future. Why worry about old age when you can have glory now? He lives fast. He spends his money on parties, on women, on aguardiente. He walks with a swagger that says, I am death. But the tragedy is that El Chino is just a tool. The cartels use these boys like bullets. Once they were fired, they were discarded. If a sicario was arrested, he knew nothing of the inner workings of the organization. He only knew the middleman who paid him. If he was killed, there were 10 more boys waiting on the corner to take his place, eager for the chance to ride the bike, eager for the chance to be somebody. The funerals of these boys were surreal events. They were not somber affairs. They were parties. The coffin would be paraded through the streets of the barrio. Friends would fire guns into the air. Music would blast from speakers. Salsa, tango, rock. They would pour rum over the casket. It was a celebration of a life lived at maximum velocity. They buried their dead with the honors of fallen knights, unaware that to the men at the top, they were nothing more than collateral damage. The offices of Envigado emerged from this chaos. This was the structure that managed the hitmen. It was a crime syndicate that acted as a collection agency and an enforcement arm. Even after Escobar fell, the offices remained. They professionalized the hit. They turned murder into a service industry. You could order a killing like you order a pizza. The price depended on the target's importance and the difficulty of the job. As we analyze the why of the sicario phenomenon, we must look at the total collapse of the social contract. These boys were not born evil. They were created by a society that had no place for them. They were the children of the displaced, the refugees of violence who flooded the cities. They saw that the law did not protect the poor. The law oppressed them, so they created their own law. The law of the gun, the law of the strongest. The legacy of the Sicario era is still visible in Medellin today. You can see it in the cemeteries, where rows of marble headstones bear the dates of the early 90s. You can see it in the scars of the older generation, and you can see it in the culture, the music, the slang, the stories. The Virgin of the Assassins still watches over the valley, a silent witness to a generation that burned itself out in a flash of gunfire. But the violence did not stay contained in the cities. As the drug trade evolved, so did the methods of control. We have looked at the urban war. Now, we must look at the rural nightmare. We must return to the jungle, where the paramilitary groups took the tactics of the sicarios and applied them to entire villages. We are moving from the assassination of individuals to the massacre of communities. We are going to shift our focus to the paramilitaries. These were the private armies funded by the cartels and wealthy landowners to fight the communist guerrillas. But in their fight against communism, they became death squads that rivaled the worst horrors of the cartels. We will look at how the drug war mutated into a civil war, where the line between criminal and soldier ceased to exist. This brings us to the story of the Chainsaw Massacres, not a movie, but a reality in the Colombian countryside. It is a chapter that is often overshadowed by the glamour of the narcos, but it is far more brutal. It is the story of how the drug trade fueled a holocaust in the hinterlands. We leave the neon lights and the gunfire of the cities behind. We are traveling deep into the emerald darkness of the Colombian jungle. Here, the laws of civilization do not apply. The state is a rumor. The police are a myth. The only authority is the man with the biggest gun. In the late 1990s, a new player entered this green hell. They were not drug traffickers in the traditional sense, though they trafficked drugs. They were not communist guerrillas, though they fought them. They were the paramilitaries, the AUC, the United Self-Defense Forces of Colombia. It sounds like a patriotic organization. It sounds like a neighborhood watch. But in reality, it was a death squad of industrial proportions, led by the Castaño brothers, who were driven by a vendetta against the guerrillas who had kidnapped and killed their father. The AUC became a monster that devoured the countryside. Their mission was simple: drain the water to catch the fish. The fish were the guerrillas. The water was the civilian population. This is the survival at its most harrowing. We are not talking about a single victim in a basement. We are talking about entire villages held hostage. The paramilitaries believed that anyone who lived in guerrilla territory was a collaborator. If you sold a bread roll to a rebel, you were the enemy. If you looked at them the wrong way, you were the enemy. And the punishment for being the enemy was not a trial. It was a spectacle. Let us focus on July 1997. The location is Mapiripan, a remote town in the Meta department. It is a place reachable only by river or small plain. It is isolated, surrounded by the vast, suffocating embrace of the jungle. On July 15th, the birds stop singing. The roar of trucks and the drone of airplanes break the silence. The AUC has arrived. They do not sneak in. They invade. Dozens of men, dressed in camouflage, armed with assault rifles and machetes, surround the town. They carry lists of names provided by local informants, by phantom accusers. They gather the villagers in the main square. Men, women, children. The heat is oppressive. The fear is a physical stench. What follows is 5 days of hell on earth. The paramilitaries take control of the town. They shut down communications. They block the river. Mapiripan becomes a concentration camp. The commander sits in the center of the square, reading from the list. When a name is called, that person is dragged forward. There is no defense. There is no plea. But the AUC wanted to send a message. A bullet is too quick. A bullet is too clean. To truly terrify a population, to make them submit to your will, you must show them something they can never unsee. The weapon of choice for this psychological warfare was the chainsaw. It was a tool of the lumberjack, perverted into an instrument of torture. They took the victims to the local slaughterhouse. The symbolism was intentional. They treated human beings like cattle. The screams echoed through the empty streets, serving as a warning to those still waiting in the square. The paramilitaries played music. They laughed. They turned murder into a carnival. The details of the mutilations are too grotesque to recount in full, but let it be known that they dismantled living people with the casual indifference of a butcher boning a chicken. For 5 days, the massacre continued. The official death count is debated to this day. Some say 30, some say 49, some say more. Bodies were thrown into the Guaviare River. The caimans and the piranhas finished the work the paramilitaries started. The river, the lifeblood of the community, became a conveyor belt of the dead. When the AUC finally left, they left behind a ghost town. The survivors did not stay to bury the dead. They ran. They packed what they could carry and fled into the jungle, adding to the millions of displaced people in Colombia. Mapiripan became a symbol of the dirty war. It showed that the conflict had mutated. It was no longer about ideology. It was about pure, unadulterated sadism funded by cocaine money. The psychology of the paramilitary fighter is distinct from the sicario. The sicario killed for money and status. The paramilitary killed for a twisted sense of patriotism and cleansing. They believed they were saving the country from communism. This delusion allowed them to commit atrocities that defy belief. They viewed themselves as heroes doing the dirty work that the military was too weak to do. But here is the connection that brings us back to the transnational nature of crime. Who funded these death squads? The same people who bought the cocaine. The AUC taxed the drug trade. They protected the labs. Every gram of cocaine snorted in a nightclub in Miami or New York had a tax paid in blood in the jungles of Meta. The consumer in the north was unknowingly subsidizing the chainsaw in the south. This brings us to a crucial pivot point in our chronicles. We have explored the depths of South American horror. We have seen the producers, the enforcers, and the monsters. But a market requires a buyer. The cocaine that fueled Escobar's bombs and Castaño's chainsaws was not staying in Colombia. It was heading north. It was heading to the land of opportunity. We are going to cross the Caribbean. We are going to follow the white powder trail to the United States. We are entering the neon-soaked, sun-bleached streets of Miami, Florida. The year is 1979. The Dadeland Mall shootout. The cocaine cowboys. The city is about to explode. But we are not just looking at the men. In a world dominated by machismo, by patrons and godfathers, there was one figure who terrified them all. A woman. A woman who invented the motorcycle assassin tactic before Escobar made it famous. A woman who was so violent, so ruthless, that the cartels themselves feared her. We are about to meet the godmother, the Black Widow, Griselda Blanco. This is the bridge between the jungles of Colombia and the streets of America. This is where the true crime story becomes a global phenomenon. Prepare yourself. The heat of Miami is different from the heat of the jungle, but it burns just as hot. The humidity of Miami is different from the humidity of the Amazon. It does not smell of earth and vegetation. It smells of asphalt, salt water, an expensive perfume masking the scent of fear. In 1979, Miami was not the glamorous tourist destination it is today. It was a city on the edge of a nervous breakdown. The sleepy retirement community was being injected with a lethal dose of adrenaline and cocaine, supplied directly from the labs we just left in Colombia. On July 11th, 1979, the war officially arrived on American soil. The location was the Dadeland Mall, a sprawling temple of consumerism in the quiet suburbs. It was the middle of the day. Shoppers were buying shoes and eating pretzels. Inside the Crown Liquors store, two men were unloading a delivery. Suddenly, a white delivery truck with "Happy Time Complete Party Supply" written on the side pulled up. But it was not a party. Two men jumped out of the van. They were not wearing masks. They were heavily armed with MAC-10 submachine guns and pistols. They walked into the liquor store and opened fire. This was not a robbery. It was an execution. Bullets shattered bottles of expensive scotch and wine, mixing alcohol with the blood of the victims. In less than 60 seconds, two men were dead, and the gunmen had vanished into the afternoon traffic. The police were stunned. They were used to revolvers and Saturday night specials. They had never seen automatic weapons used with such brazen disregard for public safety. They called it the Dadeland Mall Massacre. The press called it the beginning of the cocaine cowboys era. But to those in the know, it was simply a business card, a message from a woman who was tired of being underestimated, a woman named Griselda Blanco. They called her La Madrina, the godmother. Before Pablo Escobar became a household name, Griselda was already a legend. Born in the slums of Cartagena and raised in the poverty of Medellin, she was a creature of pure survival instinct. She did not just enter the male-dominated world of drug trafficking. She kicked the door down and shot everyone inside. She was short, she was heavy-set, and she had a smile that could freeze water. Griselda is the spiritual mother of the motorcycle assassin tactic. Long before the sicarios of Medellin were terrorizing Colombia, Griselda was using motorcycles in New York and Miami to eliminate her rivals. She understood the physics of the street. A motorcycle is fast, it is agile, and the rider is anonymous behind a helmet. She industrialized murder. She treated it as a logistical problem to be solved with speed and overwhelming violence. Her paranoia was legendary. In the drug world, trust is a currency that devalues quickly. For Griselda, the exchange rate was zero. She saw enemies in every shadow. If she suspected you of stealing, you died. If she suspected you of talking to the police, you died. If you simply looked at her the wrong way on a bad day, you died. She killed business partners, she killed rivals, and most infamously, she killed her husbands. This earned her another nickname, the Black Widow. She went through 3 husbands, and all 3 met violent ends connected to her business. She did not grieve, she inherited. She absorbed their power, their networks, and their money. She was a black hole of ambition. But her cruelty went beyond tactical necessity. It ventured into the realm of the pathological. She enjoyed the power of life and death. The most chilling example of her depravity involves a hit on a former enforcer named Jesus Chucho Castro. Chucho had offended the godmother. Griselda ordered a hit. Her assassins found Chucho driving his car. They pulled up alongside him and opened fire. But they missed Chucho. Instead, they hit his 2-year-old son, Johnny, who was sleeping in the car. When the news reached Griselda, a normal human being would have been horrified. A professional criminal would have been annoyed by the mistake. Griselda Blanco was delighted. She reportedly told her associates that she was glad the baby was dead because it would hurt Chucho more than if she had killed him. She wanted him to suffer. She wanted him to live with the pain. That is a level of malice that transcends simple criminality. By the early 1980s, Miami was a war zone. The morgue was so full that they had to rent a refrigerated Burger King truck to store the bodies. Griselda was at the center of the storm. She lived in luxury, moving between penthouses, surrounded by bodyguards and sycophants. She hosted orgies, she smoked basuco, and she ordered hits like she was ordering room service. She named her youngest son Michael Corleone, a testament to her obsession with the mafia mythos. But the heat was becoming unbearable. The United States government could not ignore the blood running in the streets. The Drug Enforcement Administration, the FBI, and local police formed a joint task force named CENTAC. Their target was the Colombians. Their target was Griselda. Sensing the net closing, she moved to California, trying to disappear into the sun and the smog of the West Coast. She lived quietly in Irvine for a short time, but a shark cannot live in a fishbowl. In 1985, the law finally caught up with her. DEA agents arrested her in her home. She was reading the Bible in bed. It was a quiet end to a loud rain. She was sentenced to prison, serving nearly 2 decades before being deported back to Colombia in 2004. The end of Griselda Blanco is the final piece of poetic justice in this noir tragedy. She returned to Medellin, a city that had changed. The cartels were different. The violence had shifted. She lived as an old woman, a relic of a bygone era. But the streets have a long memory. In September 2012, Griselda was leaving a butcher shop. She had just bought meat for the week. A motorcycle pulled up. 2 men. The driver waited. The passenger stepped off. He walked up to the 79-year-old woman and fired 2 shots into her head. It was the exact method she had pioneered. The godmother was killed by her own invention. She died on the concrete, amidst the noise of the city she helped destroy. The era of the cocaine cowboys was a time of fire and fury. It was loud. It was explosive. But as the smoke clears over Miami, we must acknowledge that evil does not always arrive with a machine gun. Sometimes it arrives in a beat-up Volkswagen Beetle. Sometimes it wears a cast on its arm. Sometimes it smiles and asks for help. We are leaving the world of organized crime. We are leaving the cartels. We are staying in the United States. But we are moving from the hot, chaotic violence of the drug trade to the cold, calculated violence of the serial killer. We are entering the golden age of serial murder. We are traveling to the Pacific Northwest, to the rain-soaked forests of Washington State and Oregon, to the highways that cut through the empty spaces of America. We are about to meet a man who was not a kingpin, but a predator. A man who looked so charming, so normal, that the world fell in love with him. We are about to open the file on Theodore Robert Bundy. The transition is from the woman who killed for power to the man who killed for possession. The whodunit is over. The psychological thriller begins now. The Pacific Northwest is a land of shadows. The tall Douglas firs block out the sun, and the rain falls with a relentless, whispering persistence. It is a landscape of grey skies and deep, cold lakes. In 1974, this quiet corner of the United States became the hunting ground for a new kind of monster. He did not look like the monsters we have seen before. He did not have the wild eyes of Garavito or the rough swagger of the sicarios. He was polite. He was educated. He was handsome. We are opening the file on Theodore Robert Bundy. To the world, he was Ted, a law student at the University of Utah, a former psychology major at the University of Washington. He worked for the Republican Party. He volunteered at a suicide prevention hotline, where he sat next to future true crime writer Anne Rule, talking people back from the ledge. He saved lives by day, but by night he was extinguishing them with a savagery that baffled the human mind. The horror of Ted Bundy lies in his camouflage. He is the ultimate example of the mask of sanity. He realized early on that evil is most effective when it looks like the boy next door. He wore his normality like a tailored suit. He understood that women were taught to fear the dark alley and the stranger in the van. They were not taught to fear the charming man in the tennis outfit who smiled and asked for help. His modus operandi was a masterclass in manipulation. He weaponized empathy. He would appear in public places, libraries, college campuses, state parks, often wearing a fake plaster cast on his arm or walking with crutches. He would drop a stack of books. He would struggle to load a sailboat onto his car. He played the role of the wounded bird, and he waited for a kind-hearted woman to come to his aid. "Excuse me, miss. Could you give me a hand?" The moment they leaned in to help, the trap snapped shut. The charm evaporated. The tire iron came down. He would bludgeon them into unconsciousness, throw them into his tan Volkswagen Beetle, and drive them into the mountains. The passenger seat of his car was removed to make it easier to transport the bodies. It was a mobile dungeon, hidden in plain sight. Let us go to a specific day. July 14th, 1974. A Sunday. The sun is shining on Lake Sammamish State Park near Seattle. It is a perfect summer day. Thousands of people are picnicking, swimming, and drinking beer. In the middle of this crowd, a handsome man with his arm in a sling approaches a young woman named Janice Ott. He asks her to help him load a sailboat onto his car. Witnesses hear him introduce himself as Ted. Janice, helpful and trusting, walks with him to the parking lot. She is never seen alive again. But the hunger of the beast is not satisfied. 4 hours later, he returns to the same park, to the same crowd. He approaches another woman, 18-year-old Denise Naslund. He uses the same line, the same sling, the same smile. She goes with him. She, too, vanishes. Think about the audacity. In the span of 4 hours, in a park teeming with families and police patrols, he abducted 2 women. He did not run. He did not panic. He operated with a cold, terrifying confidence. He believed he was smarter than everyone else. He believed he was invisible. And for a long time he was. The police had a name. Ted. They had a description. Handsome, Volkswagen Beetle. But they could not believe that the clean-cut law student could be the man they were looking for. As the heat in Washington intensified, Bundy did what predators do. He migrated. He moved to Salt Lake City, Utah, to attend law school. The killings in Seattle stopped, and the killings in Utah began. The pattern was identical. Women vanishing from campuses, from malls, from the streets. But in Utah, the mask slipped. November 8th, 1974. A rainy night in Murray, Utah. Ted approaches an 18-year-old woman named Carol DeRonch at a shopping mall. He poses as a police officer, complete with a badge. He tells her someone has tried to break into her car. He convinces her to come with him to the station to file a report. She gets into his Volkswagen, but something is wrong. He drives in the opposite direction of the police station. He pulls over in a dark area. He snaps a pair of handcuffs onto her wrist, but he only manages to cuff one hand. Carol DeRonch fights. She is fighting for her life. She screams. She kicks. She claws at him. In the struggle, the door opens. She tumbles out onto the wet asphalt. She runs into the path of an oncoming car. She survives. This is the first crack in the armor. Carol Daronch provides the police with a detailed description. She identifies the car. She identifies the man. The ghost finally has a face that the law can see. But Bundy is arrogant. He does not flee immediately. He believes he can talk his way out of anything. He believes his intellect is a shield that no policeman can pierce. He drifts to Colorado. The trail of dead women follows him like a shadow. Nurses, ski instructors, students. He is hunting in the high country now. But in August 1975, a highway patrolman stops a Volkswagen Beetle for a minor traffic violation. In the trunk, he finds a ski mask, a crowbar, handcuffs, and trash bags. It is a serial killer's toolkit. Ted Bundy is arrested, but a cage cannot hold a man who is made of smoke. Bundy is not just a killer. He is an escape artist. He treats the legal system with contempt. He fires his lawyers. He represents himself. He treats the courtroom like a stage. And while awaiting trial in Aspen, Colorado, for the murder of Karen Campbell, he executes his first escape. June 7th, 1977. During a recess in the courthouse, Bundy asks to visit the law library. He is unshackled. He is left alone. He opens a window. He jumps 2 stories to the ground. He injures his ankle, but he runs. For 6 days, the most dangerous man in America is loose in the mountains of Aspen. He breaks into cabins for food. He sleeps in the woods. He is eventually recaptured, cold and hungry, but the legend grows. He is put in a more secure cell, but his mind is already working on the next plan. He loses weight. He starves himself until he is skeletal. Why? Because he has found a flaw in the ceiling of his cell, a crawl space. If he can get thin enough, he can squeeze through. December 30th, 1977. While the jailers are celebrating the holiday season, Ted Bundy piles books under his blanket to mimic the shape of a sleeping body. He squeezes into the crawl space. He crawls through the dust and the darkness, drops down into the jailer's apartment, changes into street clothes, and walks out the front door into the snowy night. He is gone. By the time the guards discover the ruse the next morning, Ted Bundy is hundreds of miles away. He is on a bus. He is on a plane. He is heading south. He is heading to a place where the girls are pretty and the winter never comes. He is heading to Tallahassee, Florida, and he is angry. The beast has been caged, and now it is loose. The control that defined his earlier murders, the ruses, the careful disposal of bodies, is about to be abandoned. He is entering a phase of frenzied violence. He is a ticking bomb, walking the streets of a college town. The final bloody chapter of his life is about to be written in a sorority house. The date is January 15th, 1978. It is 3 o'clock in the morning. The campus of Florida State University in Tallahassee is asleep. The Chi Omega sorority house sits silent in the darkness. Inside, dozens of young women are sleeping, safe in their beds, unaware that the devil has unlocked the back door. Ted Bundy is no longer the charming law student with a cast on his arm. He is drunk on vodka and rage. He is a feral animal cornered by his own demons, and he is about to unleash a storm of violence that will redefine the concept of a spree killing. He enters the house. He picks up a heavy log of oak firewood from a pile near the door. This is his weapon. Primal, brutal. There is no sophistication here. He creeps up the stairs. The silence of the house is about to be shattered, but not by screams. The attacks are so sudden so violent that the victims never have a chance to cry out. He enters the room of 21-year-old Margaret Bowman. He strikes her repeatedly with the log. She dies in her sleep, her skull crushed by the man she never saw. He moves down the hall. He finds 20-year-old Lisa Levy. The violence here escalates. He beats her. He sexually assaults her. But he leaves something behind that will seal his fate. In a moment of animalistic fury, he bites her on the buttock. It is a savage, jagged wound. He leaves the room, panting, his blood boiling. He attacks 2 more women, Kathy Kleiner and Karen Chandler. They survive, but they are left with broken jaws, broken teeth, and scars that will never fade. The entire attack lasts less than 15 minutes. 15 minutes to destroy 4 lives. As he flees the house, a student named Nita Neary sees him. She sees a man in a knit cap, holding a club, silhouetted against the light of the door. She sees his nose, a sharp, distinctive profile. She does not know it yet, but she has just looked into the face of the boogeyman. Bundy escapes into the night, leaving the sorority house looking like a slaughterhouse. But the frenzy is not over. The beast is still hungry. He drives west, towards Pensacola. On February 9th, 1978, he spots 12-year-old Kimberly Leach at her junior high school. This is the final degradation of his standard. He usually targeted college women. Now he takes a child. He abducts her, kills her, and leaves her body in a hogshed. The organized, careful predator of Seattle is gone. In his place is a desperate, sloppy killer running on fumes. The end of the road comes on February 15th, 1978. A police officer named David Lee spots a stolen orange Volkswagen in a quiet neighborhood in Pensacola. He runs the plates. He attempts a stop. The driver flees. A chase ensues. It ends in a physical struggle on the asphalt. The suspect kicks the officer, fights for his gun, but Officer Lee prevails. As he handcuffs the man, the suspect looks up and says, "I'm Ted Bundy. I've been running for a long time. The game is over." But the circus is just beginning. The trial of Ted Bundy for the Chi Omega murders is the first nationally televised trial in American history. It is a spectacle. Bundy, ever the narcissist, tries to take control. He wears a suit. He flirts with the cameras. He even proposes marriage to his girlfriend, Carol Ann Boone, while she is on the witness stand. It is a grotesque mockery of the justice system. He believes he can charm the jury. He believes he is smarter than the prosecutors. But he forgot one thing: the bite mark. Forensic odontology was a new science in the late 70s. The prosecution calls Dr. Richard Souviron. He brings in enlarged photos of the bite mark on Lisa Levy's body. He brings in a mold of Ted Bundy's teeth. The courtroom goes silent as he overlays the 2 images. The jagged teeth of the killer fit perfectly into the wounds on the victim. It is irrefutable. It is the signature of the beast. The charm offensive crumbles under the weight of hard science. The jury does not see a handsome law student. They see a monster. They return a verdict of guilty. The judge imposes the death penalty. Ted Bundy is sent to Rayford Prison, to death row. For 10 years, he sits in a cage. He files appeals. He tries to trade secrets for time. He confesses to more murders, hoping that the family's desire for closure will keep him alive. He offers to help the FBI catch other serial killers. He becomes the Hannibal Lecter of real life, a consultant on the nature of evil. But the clock runs out. January 24th, 1989. The sun rises over the flat fields of Florida. Outside the prison, a macabre festival is taking place. Thousands of people have gathered. They are wearing T-shirts that say, "Burn Bundy, burn." They are holding frying pans. They are drinking beer and cheering. It is a release of a decade of fear. Inside the execution chamber, Bundy is strapped into Old Sparky, the electric chair. His head is shaved. His eyes are wide. At 7:16 in the morning, the switch is thrown. 2,000 volts of electricity surge through the body of the man who terrorized a nation. A white flag is waved outside the prison. The crowd erupts in cheers. Fireworks are set off. The handsome devil is dead. The nightmare is over. Or is it? As the hearse carries Bundy's body away, a chilling realization settles in. Bundy was a celebrity. He was the star of the show. But while the world was watching him, while the FBI was analyzing his every word, another monster was waking up in the very woods where Bundy had started. We are traveling back to the Pacific Northwest, back to the Green River. Bundy told the detectives that he was not the only one. He told them, "The riverman is out there." He was right. While the police were popping champagne over Bundy's execution, a man named Gary Ridgway was quietly, methodically strangling women and dumping them in the river. We are entering the story of the most prolific serial killer in American history by confirmed convictions. He did not have Bundy's charm. He did not have a law degree. He was a truck painter. He was dull. He was ordinary. And that is what made him invisible. We are opening the file on the Green River Killer. This is The Hunt, at its most frustrating and its most prolonged. This is a story of a 20-year game of cat and mouse, where the cat was blind and the mouse was hiding in plain sight. The Green River is a dark, winding artery that cuts through the industrial underbelly of King County, Washington. In the daylight, it is scenic, flanked by trees and moss. But in the early 1980s, under the cover of the relentless northwest rain, it became a graveyard. This was not a dumping ground for trash. It was a dumping ground for human beings. The killer who prowled these banks did not view his victims as people. He viewed them as garbage to be discarded when he was done using them. The nightmare began in the summer of 1982. Boys playing near the river found a body, then another, then another. By the time the police realized what they were dealing with, the count was already spiraling out of control. The victims were young women, mostly runaways and sex workers who walked the Pacific Highway South, a stretch of asphalt known simply as the Strip. It was a neon-lit corridor of cheap motels, truck stops, and desperate transactions. The police formed the Green River Task Force. It became the largest, most expensive murder investigation in American history up to that point. At its height, 50 investigators were working around the clock. They had computers, they had tips, they had the FBI. But they had a problem. The killer was targeting women that society had already turned its back on. These were high-risk victims. When they vanished, no one noticed for days, sometimes weeks. The killer knew this. He was a creature of the ecosystem. He knew that a prostitute getting into a truck was not suspicious. It was business. He picked them up, drove them to a secluded spot, strangled them, and then dumped them in the river or the deep woods. He was efficient. He was quiet. He was the ultimate predator because he was utterly unremarkable. He did not have the swagger of a cowboy or the charm of a law student. He was invisible. His name was Gary Leon Ridgway. To his neighbors, he was a truck painter at the Kenworth factory. He was a man who obsessively attended garage sales. He was married. He went to church. He was the guy who complained about the neighbors' dogs. He was so average, so painfully boring, that he defied the profile of a monster. The psychologists were looking for a genius, a madman, They were not looking for a man who brought a brown bag lunch to work every day for 30 years. But Ridgway was on the radar. In 1983, he was identified as a suspect. A witness had seen a victim get into a truck that matched his. The police brought him in. They grilled him. They gave him a polygraph test. And here is the terrifying failure of the science of the time. Gary Ridgway passed. He was calm. He denied everything. The machine said he was telling the truth. The police, frustrated and lacking physical evidence, had to let him go. Imagine the tragedy of that moment. The monster walked out of the police station, got back into his truck, and went back to killing. For nearly 2 decades, he lived among the people of Washington. He went to family barbecues. He raised a son. And all the while, he was visiting the graves of his victims, sometimes having sex with the decomposing bodies, reliving the kill. He was a necrophile, a man whose sexual gratification was linked to the total stillness of death. The desperation of the task force led them to strange places. In 1984, as we discussed, they reached out to Ted Bundy on death row. Bundy, playing the role of the professor, told them to look for a man who returned to the dump sites. He visits them, Bundy said. Stake out a fresh grave. The police tried. But Ridgway was cautious. He stopped visiting the sites when the heat got too high. He simply stopped killing for a while, or he buried them better. The years dragged on. 1985, 1990. The Green River Killer became a myth, a ghost story used to frighten children. The task force was scaled down. The files collected dust. The families of the 49 confirmed victims waited in an agony of silence. They had no bodies, no justice, only the empty space where a daughter or a sister used to be. The case went cold. It seemed that the perfect crime had been committed not once, but 49 times. But technology was catching up. The science of DNA was evolving from a theoretical tool into a forensic sledgehammer. In 1987, during one of the investigations, police had taken a saliva sample from Ridgway, a simple piece of gauze chewed by a truck painter. It sat in an evidence locker for 14 years, a ticking time bomb waiting for the future to arrive. In 2001, the King County Sheriff's Office decided to re-examine the evidence using the new short tandem repeat testing method. They pulled the saliva sample. They pulled semen found on the earliest victims. They ran the comparison. The computer did not hesitate. The match was perfect. The ghost had a genetic code, and the code belonged to the man they had let go 18 years earlier. November 30th, 2001. Gary Ridgway is leaving the Kenworth truck plant. He is 52 years old now. He looks like a grandfather. He is thinking about his dinner, about his third wife. Suddenly the world explodes. SWAT teams surround him. Guns are drawn. He is pulled from his truck. There is no high-speed chase, no shootout. He surrenders with a look of mild annoyance, as if he is being inconvenienced by a traffic ticket. The arrest shocks the community. His wife is hysterical. She cannot believe her gentle Gary is a killer. His co-workers are stunned. He was the guy who washed his truck every weekend. This is the banality of evil in its purest form. The man who strangled 70 women did not have horns. He had a mustache and a lunchbox. But the arrest was only the beginning. The police had DNA linking him to 4 victims. They knew he killed more. They needed to find the bodies. They needed to close the open wounds of dozens of families. And so, the prosecutors made a deal with the devil, a deal that sickened many, but was deemed necessary. They took the death penalty off the table. In exchange, Ridgway had to confess to everything. He had to lead them to every single grave. The interrogation of Gary Ridgway is a journey into the mind of a dull, repetitive machine. He did not brag like Bundy. He did not preach like Manson. He spoke about murder as if he were talking about painting a truck. "I choked her," he would say. "I put her in the woods." He complained about his memory. He could not remember their faces. He could not remember their names. To him, they were not people. They were clusters. He grouped them by where he dumped them. "I killed so many women I have a hard time keeping them straight," he told the detectives. It was not a boast. It was a statement of fact. He had killed so many that he had lost count. He estimated 70. The police believe it could be near 90. He was the most prolific serial killer in American history by confirmed convictions, and yet he was a man of zero substance. The search for the bodies began anew. Old men now, the detectives walked into the woods with the killer in shackles. Ridgway would point to a patch of ferns. "I think I left one there," he would mumble. And they would dig, and they would find a bone, a tooth, a fragment of a life stolen 20 years ago. It was a slow, grim harvest. In the courtroom in 2003, Ridgway stood to receive his sentence. The families of the victims were allowed to speak. It was a parade of raw, unfiltered grief. Mothers screamed at him. Fathers wept. Ridgway sat there, stone-faced, showing no emotion. He was a rock. Nothing could penetrate his indifference. But then, something extraordinary happened. An elderly man, the father of one of the victims, stood up. He did not scream. He did not curse. He looked at the killer and said, "Mr. Ridgway, there are people here who hate you. I am not one of them. You have made it difficult to live up to what I believe, and that is what God says to do, and that is to forgive. You are forgiven, sir." For the first time in the entire process, the rock cracked. Gary Ridgway, the man who had strangled dozens of women without blinking, began to cry. He sobbed. Was it remorse? Was it the shock of forgiveness? Or was it just the realization that he was no longer the powerful predator, but a pathetic old man being pitied by his victim's father? Ridgway was sentenced to 48 consecutive life sentences, one for each victim confirmed at the time. He was thrown into the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla. He lives in solitary confinement, 23 hours a day. He is a relic, a specimen in a cage. The Green River Killer case teaches us that the most dangerous monsters are the ones who blend in. They are the ones who follow the rules during the day so they can break them at night. But as we close the file on the Pacific Northwest, we must acknowledge a different kind of horror, a horror that is not hidden in the woods, but one that is performed in the basement of a suburban house. We are traveling to the Midwest, to Kansas, to a place where the plains are flat and the secrets run deep. We are about to meet a man who did not kill for sex, or for money, or for hate. He killed for control. He killed for the fantasy of binding, torturing, and killing. He gave himself a name, a brand, BTK. We are entering the mind of Dennis Rader, the man who bound, tortured, and killed 10 people over a span of 30 years, all while serving as the president of his church council and a Cub Scout leader. This is the story of the ego that could not stay silent. We are landing in the heartland of America, Wichita, Kansas. It is a city of aircraft factories, flat horizons, and quiet, church-going neighborhoods. It is the last place you expect to find a demon. But in 1974, the devil came to Kansas, and he brought a coil of rope with him. Unlike the Green River Killer, who killed in silence. This monster wanted the world to hear him scream. He wanted a name. He wanted a brand. He wanted to be a celebrity of the macabre. The nightmare begins on a cold morning in January, 1974. The Otero family is preparing for a normal day. Joseph, the father, is an Air Force veteran. Julie, the mother, is getting the children ready. But a shadow slips into their home. A man cuts the phone lines. He enters with a gun, but the gun is just a tool for control. His true weapon is fear. He holds the family hostage, binding them one by one. What happens next is a slaughter that shatters the innocence of Wichita forever. Joseph, Julie, and two of their children, Josephine and Joseph Jr., are methodically strangled. The killer takes his time. He is not in a rush. He is enacting a fantasy he has rehearsed in his mind for years. When he leaves behind not just 4 bodies, but a city paralyzed by terror. The police are baffled. Who kills an entire family in broad daylight? For months, the city holds its breath. Then, the voice speaks. In October 1974, a letter arrives at the Wichita Public Library. It is hidden inside a mechanical engineering textbook. The writer claims responsibility for the Otero murders. He describes details only the killer could know, but it is the signature that freezes the blood. He suggests a few names for himself: the Section 8 Strangler, the Wichita Hangman, but he settles on 3 words that define his existence: bind, torture, kill, BTK. The initials BTK become a curse word in Kansas. The killer strikes again. Catherine Bright, Shirley Vian, Nancy Fox. He targets women in their homes. He stalks them. He learns their routines. He is a hit-and-run killer, vanishing back into the fabric of the city after each atrocity. And after each kill, he taunts the police. He sends poems. He sends drawings. He calls the dispatch center to report his own crimes, his voice calm, almost bored, as if ordering a pizza. But who is the man behind the mask? He is not a drifter. He is not a loner living in a basement. He is Dennis Rader. He is a compliance officer for Park City, the man who measures your grass to make sure it is not too tall. He is the president of his church council. He is a Cub Scout leader. He is a husband and a father of 2. He is the ultimate hypocrite. By day, he enforces the petty rules of suburbia. By night, he breaks the ultimate law of humanity. The psychology of Dennis Rader is a study in narcissism. He kept souvenirs from his victims: driver's licenses, jewelry, photographs. He had a hit kit, a bowling bag filled with ropes, handcuffs, and weapons. He treated his murders like projects. He had a filing cabinet in his mind where he stored his fantasies. He referred to his Factor X, the dark urge that drove him to kill. But unlike an uncontrollable beast, Rader could turn it off. After the murder of Nancy Fox in 1977, BTK goes dormant. The police wait, the city waits, but the letters stop, the killings stop. For nearly a decade there is silence. Has he died? Has he moved? No, he is simply busy. He is raising his children. He is working. He is channeling his sadism into his job as a compliance officer, bullying neighbors over leash laws and zoning violations. The monster has not left. He has just changed his uniform. In 1985, he resurfaces briefly to kill Maureen Hedge. In 1986, Vicky Wegerle. In 1991, Dolores Davis. These are gap murders, spaced out by years. He is no longer the frenzied killer of the 70s. He is an older, patient predator. He takes his victims to remote locations. He photographs them in bondage. He engages in terrifying role play with the bodies. And then he goes home to cook dinner for his family. The silence returns. The 90s pass. The new millennium arrives. BTK becomes a cold case, a legend of the past. The police have DNA, but they have no suspect to match it to. The file sits in a basement, gathering dust. Dennis Rader is now in his late 50s. He is looking forward to retirement. He believes he has gotten away with it. He believes he has won the game, but the ego is a hungry beast. In 2004, the local newspaper, the Wichita Eagle, runs a story on the 30th anniversary of the Otero murders. The article implies that BTK is dead or in prison. It calls him a relic. This wounds Rader's pride. He cannot stand to be irrelevant. He cannot stand the thought that the world has forgotten his masterpieces. He decides to correct the record. He begins to write again. In March 2004, a letter arrives. It contains a photocopy of Vicky Vegale's driver's license and photos of her body. The city goes cold. He is back. The ghost has returned. Rader begins a new campaign of terror, sending packages to television stations, hiding clues in parks. He's playing a game of catch me if you can. He loves the attention. He watches the news reports with glee. But the world has changed since 1974. Technology has advanced. Rader, however, is stuck in the past. He asks the police, in a letter, a question that seals his fate. Can I send you a floppy disk? Can it be traced? The police, seizing the opportunity, answer him publicly. They place an ad in the paper saying, Rex, it will be fine. They lie. Dennis Rader, the man who thinks he is a genius, believes them. On February 16th, 2005, he sends a purple floppy disk to a local TV station. The police seize it. They hand it to their cyber forensics team. They scan the disk. It is not empty. Buried in the metadata of a deleted Microsoft Word document are two pieces of information. The words Christ Lutheran Church and the name Dennis. A quick search reveals that the president of the Christ Lutheran Church is a man named Dennis Rader. The police drive by his house. They see a vehicle that matches the description of one seen at a crime scene. They obtain a DNA sample from his daughter's medical records at the university clinic. They match it to the semen found at the crime scenes. The match is perfect. The game is over. On February 25th, 2005, Dennis Rader is driving home for lunch. He sees a line of police cars. He thinks there is an accident. He does not realize they are there for him until the guns are pointed at his head. He surrenders without a fight. When the detectives ask him why he sent the disc, why he trusted them, he looks at them with genuine hurt and says, I thought we had a deal. Why did you lie to me? It is the statement of a child. It is the statement of a man who lived in a delusion where he controlled the rules. The interrogation is surreal. Rader talks for 30 hours. He describes the murders with the dry, monotone voice of a bureaucrat reading a shopping list. He demonstrates how he tied the knots. He corrects the detectives on the details. He is proud of his work. He wants credit for every second of terror he inflicted. In court, he pleads guilty. He stands before the judge and describes the killings in graphic detail, devoid of any emotion. He calls his victims projects. He treats the courtroom like a lecture hall. The families of the victims listen in horror, but also in relief. The monster has a face, and the face is just a pathetic, balding man in a suit. Dennis Rader is sentenced to 10 consecutive life sentences. He will never leave prison. He is currently incarcerated in the El Dorado Correctional Facility in Kansas. He spends his days in solitary confinement, writing poetry, drawing, and rotting in the box he built for himself. The blind, torture, kill killer is now just a number in the system. But while Raider was playing games with the media in Kansas, another horror was unfolding in the deep woods of Wisconsin. A horror that was not about ego, but about the total collapse of reality. A horror that inspired Psycho, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and the Silence of the Lambs. We are traveling back in time to the 1950s, to a farmhouse in Plainfield, Wisconsin, to a man who loved his mother a little too much. We are about to meet the ghoul who started it all, the man who wore the dead. We are opening the file on Ed Gein. This is the transition from the calculated evil of Raider to the chaotic, insane evil of Gein. We are moving from the suburbs to the isolation of the rural nightmare. The year is 1957. The location is Plainfield, Wisconsin, a town so small that if you blink, you miss it. It is a place of hard winters, struggling farms, and people who keep to themselves. But on the outskirts of town, down a lonely dirt road, sits a farmhouse that is about to become the epicenter of the American nightmare. It is a dilapidated grey structure, slowly sinking into the frozen earth. The windows are dark, the paint is peeling, and inside, a 51-year-old man named Ed Gein is busy with his hobbies. Ed Gein is not a loud man. He is the town fool, the odd handyman who babysits the neighbors' children and brings them venison jerky. He is shy. He giggles nervously. He lives alone in that big, rotting house, ever since his mother, Augusta, died in 1945. Augusta was not just a mother. She was a tyrant. She preached fire and brimstone. She told Ed that all women were whores, that sex was a sin, and that the only pure love was between a mother and her son. When she died, Ed didn't just lose a parent. He lost his connection to reality. The horror reveals itself on November 16th, 1957. Bernice Warden, the owner of the local hardware store, vanishes. Her son, a deputy sheriff, finds blood on the floor and a receipt for antifreeze written to Ed Gein. It is a thin lead, but it is enough to send the sheriff to the farmhouse. The sun is setting as the police cars roll up the driveway. The house is silent. There is no electricity. The officers enter with flashlights, their beams cutting through the gloom. The smell hits them first. It is a thick, cloying stench of rot, mildew, and old garbage. The house is a labyrinth of trash. Magazines, boxes, tin cans piled to the ceiling. But as they push deeper into the squalor, the flashlights reveal things that the mind refuses to accept. Hanging from the rafters in the summer kitchen is a carcass. At first, the sheriff thinks it is a deer. It is deer season after all. But as he steps closer, the light catches the pale human skin. It is the headless, gutted body of Bernice Warden, hung upside down like a side of beef. The panic sets in. The officers draw their guns, but there is no one to shoot. They are alone in a museum of anatomy. They begin to catalogue the contents of the house, and this list reads like a menu from hell. They find bowls made from the tops of human skulls. They find chairs upholstered in human skin. They find a belt made of nipples. They find a shoebox containing 9 salted vulvas, painted silver. They find a corset made from a female torso, laced up the back. This is not murder. This is something else. This is desecration. Ed Gein was not killing for sexual release in the traditional sense. He was trying to build a suit. He wanted to crawl inside the skin of a woman. he wanted to become his mother. When they catch Ed, he is having dinner at a neighbor's house. He surrenders without a fight. In the interrogation room, he is confused. He doesn't understand the fuss. He admits to killing Bernice Warden and a tavern owner named Mary Hogan 3 years prior. But the other body parts, the skulls, the skin, he didn't kill them, he explains earnestly. He dug them up. For years, while the town of Plainfield slept, Ed Gein was prowling the local cemeteries. He would read the obituaries, looking for women who resembled his mother. He would go to the graves at night, dig up the fresh coffins, and drag the bodies back to his farmhouse. He was a ghoul, a grave robber in the 20th century. He lived with the dead. He danced in the moonlight wearing their skin. The psychological impact of Ed Gein on the American psyche cannot be overstated. Before 1957, monsters were dragons or vampires. After Gein, the monster was the quiet neighbor. His crimes were so grotesque, so bizarre, that they birthed a new genre of horror. Robert Bloch wrote Psycho, based on Gein. Tobe Hooper made The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, based on Gein. Thomas Harris created Buffalo Bill in The Silence of the Lambs, based on Gein. The Butcher of Plainfield is the father of modern horror cinema. But Ed himself? He was found unfit to stand trial by reason of insanity. He spent the rest of his life in a mental institution. He was a model patient. He was quiet, polite, and died of cancer in 1984. He is buried in the Plainfield Cemetery, in an unmarked grave, because souvenir hunters kept chipping pieces off his tombstone. Ed Gein represents the horror of isolation. He shows us what happens when a mind is left to rot in the dark, twisted by religious fanaticism and loneliness. But as terrifying as Gein was, he was an anomaly. He was a hermit. He hid in the shadows. What happens when the monster doesn't hide? What happens when the monster is the life of the party? What happens when he is a pillar of the community, a man who shakes hands with the First Lady, a man who dresses up as a clown to entertain sick children? We are leaving the desolate farmhouse of Wisconsin. We are traveling to the suburbs of Chicago, to Des Plaines, Illinois, to a nice brick house with a crawl space that is hiding a secret far worse than Ed Gein's furniture. We are about to meet the killer clown. We are about to meet the man who turned a suburban home into a mass grave. We are entering the world of John Wayne Gacy. This is the shift from the grave robber to the social chameleon. Gein was visibly crazy. Gacy was terrifyingly sane. He was a businessman, a precinct captain for the Democratic Party. He was a man who had his picture taken with Rosalind Carter. And while he was smiling for the cameras, there were bodies rotting beneath his floorboards. The whodunit is long gone. The survival is over. We are now in the realm of the facade. The mask is not made of skin anymore. It is made of grease paint. We have arrived in Norwood Park Township, a quiet, unincorporated community just outside of Chicago. It is the kind of place where people move to escape the noise and danger of the big city. The streets are lined with trees. The houses are made of sturdy brick. And at 8213 Summerdale Avenue, there lives a man who seems to embody the American dream. His name is John Wayne Gacy. He is a gregarious, heavy-set man with a booming laugh and a tireless work ethic. He is a contractor, the owner of PDM Contractors. He hires local high school boys to work for him, giving them a start in life. He is a precinct captain for the local Democratic Party, a man who organizes the annual Polish Constitution Day parade. He hosts elaborate summer parties in his backyard, grilling hot dogs and hamburgers for hundreds of neighbors. And most famously, he puts on a costume. He paints a wide red smile on his face. He puts on big shoes. He becomes Pogo the Clown, performing at charity events and children's hospitals. But John Wayne Gacy has a secret. It is a secret that is literally rotting beneath the floorboards of his ranch-style house. While Ed Gein was a recluse who hid from the world, Gacy is hiding in plain sight. He uses his respectability as a shield. Who would suspect the man who shook hands with the First Lady? Who would suspect the man who dresses up to make sick children laugh? It is the ultimate camouflage. The horror of Gacy is not just the killing, it is the duality. By day, he is shouting orders at construction sites. By night, he is prowling the streets of Chicago in his black Oldsmobile, looking for prey. His victims are young men and teenage boys. Some are runaways, the disposable youth, similar to the victims of the Green River Killer. But many are not. Many are employees. Many are boys he lured with the promise of a construction job, a high wage, and a mentorship. Once he gets them inside the house on Summerdale Avenue, the trap is sprung. Gacy does not use a gun. He uses a psychological trick. He calls it the rope trick. He tells the boys he can show them a magic trick. "I can put these handcuffs on you and take them off before you can blink," he says. Or he bets them he can tie a knot they cannot escape from. It is a game, a challenge to their masculinity. And because they trust him, because he is a boss, a father figure, they agree. The moment the handcuffs click shut, the clown vanishes. The monster emerges. Gacy tortures them. He rapes them. He strangles them with a rope, twisting a garrote until the life leaves their eyes. And then he opens the trap door in his utility room. Beneath the house is a crawl space. It is dark, damp, and filled with dirt. This is where he puts them, not in a cemetery, not in a river, but right there, beneath the feet of the people walking in his house. For 6 years, from 1972 to 1978, the house on Summerdale Avenue becomes a factory of death. But there is a problem. Biology does not obey the rules of a sociopath. Bodies decompose. The smell begins to seep up through the floorboards. It permeates the carpet. It hangs in the air like a poisonous fog. Visitors notice it. His wife notices it. "It smells like dead rats," she complains. Gacy has an answer for everything. He blames a broken sewer line. He blames moisture in the foundation. He pours lime into the crawl space to mask the odor. He installs heavy industrial fans. At his famous backyard barbecues, guests comment on the stench. Gacy laughs it off, blaming the nearby swamp. He serves them food, smiling, knowing that they are standing yards away from a mass grave. It is a level of arrogance that defies comprehension. The undoing of John Wayne Gacy comes in December 1978, and it comes because he breaks his own pattern. He targets a boy who is not a runaway. He targets 15-year-old Robert Peast. Robert is a popular student, an athlete, a boy with a loving family. He works at a pharmacy. On the evening of December 11th, he tells his mother, "I'm going to talk to a contractor about a summer job. I'll be right back." He walks outside to meet the man in the black Oldsmobile. He never comes back. But Robert Peast has a mother who does not wait. She calls the police immediately. She tells them about the contractor. The police connect the dots. The contractor is John Wayne Gacy. But Gacy is a big shot. You do not just kick down the door of a political precinct captain. You need proof. The Des Plaines police begin a 24-hour surveillance of Gacy. It is a game of cat and mouse. Gacy knows they are watching. He loves it. He invites the detectives into his house for coffee. He introduces them to his lawyers. He is smug. He believes he is untouchable. But the detectives notice something. When the furnace kicks on, a smell wafts up from the vents. It is a sweet, sickly smell that policemen know too well. It is the scent of death. On December 21st, 1978, the police finally get a search warrant. They are not looking for bodies initially. They are looking for evidence of Robert Piest. But while crawling in the crawl space, a police officer finds a bone. It is not a chicken bone. It is a human femur. The order is given to excavate. What follows is a scene from a nightmare. The house on Somerdale Avenue is dismantled. Teams of forensic anthropologists and police officers wearing jumpsuits and gas masks begin to dig in the mud of the crawl space. It is winter in Chicago. The ground is freezing, but the earth yields its terrible harvest. 1 body, 2 bodies, 5, 10, 20. The count keeps rising. The world watches in horror as body bag after body bag is carried out of the front door of the nice brick house. In total, they find 29 bodies buried in the crawl space and under the driveway. The crawl space was so packed that Gacy had run out of room. He had to start stacking them. When even that wasn't enough, he dumped the last 4 victims into the Des Plaines River. 33 young men. That was the final tally. 33 lives extinguished by the friendly neighborhood clown. The scale of the carnage is overwhelming. It makes Gacy the most prolific serial killer in American history at that time, surpassing the known victims of Dean Call and Juan Corona. The nation is in shock. How could this happen? How could a man live with 29 corpses under his floor? Gacy's trial in 1980 is a spectacle. He pleads insanity. He claims that Jack, an evil alter ego, committed the murders. He tries to paint himself as a victim of a fractured mind. But the jury sees the receipts. They see the careful planning. They see the construction of the graves. They see the rope trick. This is not the work of a madman. It is the work of a cold, calculating sadist who enjoyed every second of his power. He is found guilty and sentenced to death. For 14 years, he sits on death row at the Menard Correctional Center. He paints. He paints pictures of dwarfs, of landscapes, and most disturbingly, of Pogo the Clown. He never shows remorse. To the end, he views himself as the smartest man in the room. On May 10th, 1994, John Wayne Gacy is executed by lethal injection. His final words are reported to be, "Kiss my ass." A final act of defiance from a man who had zero respect for human life. The house on Somerdale Avenue was bulldozed. The lot stood empty for years, a scar on the neighborhood. Today, a new house stands there, and new people live on the land. But the soil remembers. The arrest of Gacy closed the chapter on the 1970s, a decade that seemed to manufacture serial killers like cars on an assembly line. But as the 1980s dawned, the darkness shifted. It moved west again. It moved to the City of Angels. But this time, the killer did not hide behind a mask of sanity. He did not wear a suit or a clown costume. He wore black leather. He worshipped Satan, and he did not care who saw him. We are traveling to Los Angeles. The year is 1985. The summer is sweltering. The city is in the grip of a heat wave that makes tempers short and sleep impossible. People are leaving their windows open at night to catch a breeze. And climbing through those open windows is a creature straight out of a heavy metal nightmare. We are about to meet the Night Stalker. We are about to meet Richard Ramirez. This is the transition from the hidden monster to the boogeyman. Gacy killed in secret, Ramirez killed for the audience. He wanted the world to see his pentagrams. He wanted the world to fear the night. This is the whodunit, turned into an action thriller. The police are not chasing a ghost. They are chasing a demon who strikes every night, moving from Diamond Bar to Burbank, killing men, women, and children indiscriminately. The rules have changed. No one is safe. The summer of 1985 in Los Angeles was not just hot, it was oppressive. A heat wave had settled over the basin, turning the San Fernando Valley into a furnace. The asphalt shimmered. The smog trapped the heat against the ground. In a normal year, people would sleep with their windows open, hoping for a breeze from the ocean. But this was not a normal year. This was the summer where an open window was an invitation to death. The city was being stalked by a predator who did not follow the rules of the jungle. He did not have a type. He did not have a pattern. He was pure, chaotic evil. We are looking at the crimes of Richard Ramirez. Unlike Ted Bundy, who used charm, or John Wayne Gacy, who used authority, Ramirez used shock and awe. He was a drifter from El Paso, Texas, with a face that looked like a skull wrapped in parchment. He was tall, gaunt, with rotting teeth and wild dark hair. He dressed in all black, wearing a leather jacket, even in the sweltering heat. He was a disciple of heavy metal and Satanism, believing that he was an agent of the devil sent to inflict pain upon the world. His modus operandi was terrifying because it was non-existent. Most serial killers are creatures of habit. They kill redheads. They kill hitchhikers. They kill on weekends. Ramirez killed anyone, anywhere, at any time. He would enter a house in the wealthy enclave of Arcadia. The next night, he would strike in the working-class neighborhood of Monterey Park. He killed men. He killed women. He molested children. He beat the elderly. There was no logic to his target selection, which meant that no one was safe. Every citizen in Los Angeles felt the crosshairs on their back. He was dubbed the Night Stalker by the press. The name fit perfectly. He was a phantom who slipped through the shadows. He would prowl the suburbs, testing doors, checking windows. If a door was locked, he moved on. If it was open, he entered. It was a terrifying game of chance. Your life depended on whether you remembered to turn a latch before you went to bed. He did not knock. He did not charm. He appeared at the foot of the bed, a silhouette of nightmare, holding a gun or a knife or a tire iron. The brutality of the attacks was medieval. He did not just kill, he desecrated. He would force his victims to swear allegiance to Satan. He would draw pentagrams on the walls, on mirrors, and even on the bodies of the dead using her lipstick. He gouged out eyes. He slashed throats. It was as if he was trying to shock God himself. The crime scenes were not just bloody, they were blasphemous. He wanted the police to know exactly who had been there. He wanted them to feel his presence. Detectives Gil Carrillo and Frank Salerno were the men tasked with hunting this demon. Salerno was a legend, the man who had caught the hillside stranglers. Carrillo was the younger, streetwise partner. They were chasing a ghost. Because Ramirez had no car, he stole vehicles, drove them to a crime scene, and then abandoned them. He left very little forensic evidence initially, but he made mistakes. He was arrogant, and in his arrogance, he left a footprint. Not just any footprint, but a specific brand of shoe. It was an Avia sneaker, size 11.5, a rare model. The police found the print in the flower beds outside the victims' homes. It became the only thread connecting the disparate murders. The detectives knew that the killer was walking through the gardens of Los Angeles, watching, waiting. They dubbed him the walk-in killer before the media came up with the more sensational Night Stalker moniker. But a shoe print does not give you a name. It only tells you that the monster has feet. The panic in Los Angeles reached a fever pitch in August. Gun sales skyrocketed. Guard dog businesses sold out of inventory. Hardware stores ran out of window locks. People were terrified. The freeways, usually jammed with traffic, were emptier at night. No one wanted to be out. The entire city was holding its breath, waiting for the sun to go down, praying that the shadow would not fall on their house. It was a siege mentality. A population of millions held hostage by one man with a bag of weapons and a head full of delusions. Ramirez fed on this fear. He followed the news. He knew they were looking for him, but he felt invincible. He believed that Satan was protecting him. He continued his spree, traveling north to San Francisco to strike there, just to prove he could. He killed a man named Peter Pan and attacked his wife. He left a pentagram drawn on the wall. He was taunting the entire state of California. He was daring them to stop him. But the devil is a fickle master. On August 24th, 1985, Ramirez attacked a couple in Mission Viejo. He shot the man and sexually assaulted the woman. But the man survived. And critically, Ramirez left a fingerprint on the rearview mirror of a stolen Toyota. The police found the car. They lifted the print. They ran it through the brand new computer system that had just been installed. In the past, matching a fingerprint took months of manual searching. The computer did it in minutes. The machine spat out a name: Richard Ramirez, born in 1960, a petty criminal with a rap sheet for auto theft and drug possession. The ghost had a name. The monster had a face. The police wasted no time. They did not just issue a warrant. They declared war. They released his mugshot to every television station and newspaper in the country. On the morning of August 31st, 1985, Richard Ramirez's face was on the front page of every paper in California. Ramirez, unaware that his anonymity was gone, was returning to Los Angeles from a trip to Arizona. He got off a Greyhound bus in downtown Los Angeles. It was the morning. The sun was shining. He walked into a convenience store to buy a soda. He noticed people looking at him, not with fear, but with recognition. He saw his own face staring back at him from the newspaper rack. The headline screamed, "Night Stalker." Panic set in. The hunter became the hunted. He ran. He crossed the street, dodging traffic. He tried to carjack a woman, but bystanders intervened. He ran into a neighborhood in East Los Angeles. This was a fatal mistake. East LA is a tight-knit community. The residents there do not take kindly to outsiders threatening their own. They recognized him. They knew exactly who he was. What happened next is one of the most cathartic moments in true crime history. Ramirez was not taken down by a SWAT team. He was not taken down by a sniper. He was taken down by the people. A group of neighbors chased him. They tackled him. They hit him with a metal pipe. They beat him into submission. By the time the police arrived, the Night Stalker was a bloody, whimpering mess on the grass. The community had reclaimed their city. The trial of Richard Ramirez was a circus. He played to the cameras. He drew a pentagram on his hand and flashed it to the jury. He mumbled, "Hail Satan," in court. He had groupies, women who wrote him love letters, infatuated by his darkness. It was a grotesque display of the celebrity culture surrounding serial killers. But the jury was not charmed. They saw the photos of the battered elderly women. They saw the grief of the families. On September 20th, 1989, Richard Ramirez was convicted of 13 counts of murder, 5 attempted murders, 11 sexual assaults, and 14 burglaries. He was sentenced to death. As he was led away, he turned to the gallery and said, "Big deal. Death always went with the territory. See you in Disneyland." It was a final, nonsensical attempt to be edgy, to have the last word. Ramirez died of B-cell lymphoma in prison in 2013. He sat on death row for 23 years, rotting away, while the city he terrorized healed and moved on. His capture marked the end of a specific era of American fear. The 80s were over. The satanic panic would fade. But the lesson remained. The monster can be anyone, and sometimes the only thing standing between you and the dark is a locked window. We have now traveled through the psychological thriller of the Black Angel, the survival horror of the Poquianchis, the cult madness of Constanzo, the terrorism of Escobar, the hunting grounds of the Green River, the clown mask of Gacy, and the satanic fury of Ramirez. We have seen the face of evil in many forms, but we have one final destination, one final story that ties the past to the present. We must conclude our journey by looking at the legacy of these crimes. We need to understand how forensic science, which we saw evolve from the simple fingerprint to the DNA match, has changed the game. But we also need to acknowledge that for every monster we catch, a new one is born. We are entering the final phase, the aftermath, the cold cases that are warming up. We are going to look at the Golden State Killer, a man who bridged the gap between the 70s and the modern era, a man who was caught not by a detective with a magnifying glass, but by a genealogist with a computer. This is the story of how the past never truly dies. It just waits for the science to catch up. We return to the Golden State. But we are rewinding the clock slightly, back to the mid-1970s. While Ted Bundy was driving his Beetle and the Hillside Stranglers were terrorizing Los Angeles, a different kind of shadow was falling over the suburbs of Sacramento. This was not a killer who struck in parks or on highways. This was a monster who came into your sanctuary. He came into the one place you were supposed to be safe, your bedroom. He started as a whisper, a rumor, the East Area rapist. He targeted single women, then couples. His methods were military in their precision. He would stake out a neighborhood for weeks. He would learn the rhythms of the street. Who walked the dog at 6? Who left the side gate unlocked? He was a voyeur, a watcher in the dark. He would break into homes before the attack, unlocking windows, unloading guns, planting ligatures under sofa cushions. He was setting the stage for his own twisted play. The terror he inflicted was psychological as much as it was physical. He would wake his victims with a blinding flashlight in their faces. He spoke through gritted teeth, a low, guttural hiss that sounded less like a man and more like a demon. "I'll kill you! I'll kill you!" He would bind the husband, then place a stack of dishes on the man's back. "If I hear them rattle," he would threaten, "I will kill everyone." Imagine the horror of that husband, lying face down in the dark, listening to the sounds of his wife being assaulted in the next room, terrified to move a muscle, terrified that a single tremble would cause the china to crash and bring death upon his family. It was a torture designed to strip men of their power, to make them complicit in their own victimization. It was a level of control that went beyond simple sadism. For 3 years, he owned Sacramento. He committed 50 rapes. The police were helpless. He was a phantom. He could vault fences like an Olympian. He knew the creek beds and the bike paths better than the cops did. He would vanish into the night, leaving behind only trauma and shoe prints. And then, just as the heat became too intense, he moved. He went south, and he escalated. The East Area Rapist became the original Night Stalker. He stopped leaving survivors. In Goleta, in Ventura, in Dana Point, he began to bludgeon his victims to death. He killed couples in their beds. He killed with a ferocity that baffled investigators. And then, in 1986, after murdering a young girl named Janelle Cruz, he simply stopped. The phone lines went dead. The window screens remained intact. The Golden State Killer, as he would later be dubbed, retired. For 30 years, silence reigned. The case went colder than cold. It became a legend, a ghost story told by detectives over whiskey. They had his DNA. They had the genetic fingerprint of the monster, but they had no name to match it to. It sat in a database, a sequence of code with no face. The world moved on. The internet was born. Cell phones were invented. And the killer lived his life, an old man in the suburbs, mowing his lawn, yelling at his neighbors, thinking he had won the ultimate game of hide and seek. But the future has a way of digging up the past. In the year 2018, a retired investigator named Paul Holes had a radical idea. He did not look for the killer in the criminal databases. He looked for him in the family trees. He used a website called GED Match, a platform where amateur genealogists upload their DNA to find long-lost cousins. Holes uploaded the killer's genetic profile. He was looking for a ghost in a forest of data. He found a match. Not the killer, but a distant relative, a third cousin. It was a tiny thread, but it was enough. Holes and a genealogist named Barbara Ray Venter began to build a family tree. They worked backward, constructing a web of thousands of people. They looked for a man who fit the profile, a man of the right age, a man with ties to Sacramento and Southern California, a man with military or police training. The branches of the tree were pruned away one by one until only a single name remained: Joseph James D'Angelo, a former police officer, a Vietnam veteran, a man who had been fired from the Auburn Police Department in 1979 for shoplifting a hammer and dog repellent. The irony was sickening. The man who had terrorized the state, the man the police had hunted for decades, was one of their own. He knew their tactics because he had been trained in them. On April 24, 2018, the task force moved in. They surveilled a modest house in Citrus Heights, California. They saw an old man, 72 years old, walking out of his garage. He looked frail. He looked grumpy. He looked like any other retiree. But when the officers swarmed him, the mask slipped. "I have a roast in the oven," he yelled. It was a mundane protest from a man who had slaughtered 13 people and destroyed countless lives. The arrest of the Golden State Killer sent a shockwave around the world. It was the moment the whodunit died and the science took over. It proved that anonymity is no longer possible. If your cousin spits in a tube to find out if they are Irish, they might accidentally catch a serial killer. The privacy of the bloodline had been breached for the sake of justice. In the interrogation room, D'Angelo was a crumbling ruin. He did not boast like Bundy. He did not lecture like Rader. He spoke to himself. He whispered about Jerry, an inner personality that he claimed drove him to do these terrible things. "I didn't have the strength to push him out," he muttered. "He made me. He went with me. It was like he was in my head. I mean, he's a part of me." It was a pathetic attempt to externalize his evil. There was no Jerry. There was only Joseph, a man who hated women, a man who hated happy families, a man who stole trinkets and lives with equal indifference. In 2020, to avoid the death penalty, Joseph DeAngelo pleaded guilty to 13 murders and dozens of kidnappings. He sat in a wheelchair, mouth agape, listening to his victims confront him. The courtroom was filled with survivors. Women who had been tied up 40 years ago stood tall and looked the monster in the eye. They were no longer victims. They were warriors. "You are a nothing," one of them told him. And she was right. Without his mask, without his gun, without the darkness, the Golden State Killer was just a hollow shell of a man, shrinking under the fluorescent lights of justice. This case marks the end of the golden age of the serial killer. The technology that caught DeAngelo has now been used to solve hundreds of cold cases. The shadows are shrinking. The monsters have fewer places to hide. But as we close the file on the Golden State Killer, we must ask ourselves one final question. We have caught the men. We have categorized their pathologies. We have mapped their crimes. But have we truly understood the darkness? We have one final step to take. We must step back and look at the tapestry we have woven. From the jungles of Colombia to the suburbs of California. From the chainsaw to the DNA test. What have we learned about the human condition? And what is lurking in the future, waiting to be born? We are moving to the conclusion, the final reflection, the last words before the microphone is turned off and the lights go out. We are about to summarize the nature of true crime. We have reached the end of our journey. We have traveled thousands of miles, crossing borders both geographical and moral. We started in the humid political powder kegs of South America and ended in the manicured, deceptively quiet suburbs of the United States. We have dissected the minds of 20 different monsters, each one a unique variation on the theme of human darkness. And now, as the curtain falls, we are left standing in the silence, holding the pieces of a puzzle that never truly fits together. Look back at the map we have drawn. It is a map stained in red. We began with the cold, aristocratic indifference of Carlos Robledo Puch in Argentina, a boy who killed out of boredom. We moved to the industrial-scale slaughter of the cartels, where Pablo Escobar and Griselda Blanco turned murder into a commodity, a line item on a balance sheet. We saw the depravity of belief with Adolfo Constanzo, who boiled bodies to feed a delusion of power. Then we witnessed the hunters of the vulnerable, Pedro Lopez and Luis Garavito, the monsters of the Andes, who proved that in a world of poverty and neglect, a killer can operate with terrifying impunity. They reminded us that society's apathy is the serial killer's greatest weapon. If we do not care about the victim, we will never catch the predator. When we crossed the border into the United States, the profile changed. The violence became intimate. It became psychological. We met Ted Bundy, the handsome devil who shattered the myth that evil looks ugly. We met John Wayne Gacy, the clown who showed us that a monster can be a pillar of the community. We met Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, whose ego was so fragile that he had to write poems about his own cruelty to feel alive. We saw the chaotic fury of Richard Ramirez, who brought the devil into the bedroom. And finally, we saw the banality of Joseph James DeAngelo, the Golden State Killer, an old man roasting a chicken, proving that sometimes the boogeyman is just a retired cop living down the street. What connects these disparate souls? Is there a why that satisfies us? We look for trauma. We look for bad mothers, like Ed Gaines. We look for head injuries. We look for societal decay. But for every abused child who becomes a killer, there are millions who become survivors, healers, and heroes. The why remains elusive. It is a black box. Perhaps some men are simply born with a wire crossed, unable to feel the electrical signal of empathy. Perhaps evil is not a disease to be cured, but a choice to be made. The evolution of crime fighting gives us some hope. We have moved from the era of the sheriff walking into a farmhouse in Plainfield to the era of genetic genealogy. The shadows are shrinking. The golden age of the serial killer, that terrifying window from the 1970s to the 1990s, has closed. Technology has made it nearly impossible to be a Ted Bundy today. Cameras are everywhere. Our phones track our movements. Our DNA is in the cloud. But do not be lulled into a false sense of security. As the physical world becomes safer, the digital world opens new doors for darkness. The predators are adapting. They are moving online. They are finding new ways to exploit, to hunt, to destroy. The medium changes, but the instinct remains. The wolf does not become a sheep just because the forest has been cut down. The wolf learns to walk in the city. And what of the victims? In our fascination with the macabre, in our obsession with the true crime genre, we often forget the names of the dead. We remember Gacy, but we forget Robert Peast. We remember Bundy, but we forget Janice Ott. We must ensure that our curiosity does not turn into glorification. We tell these stories not to celebrate the monster, but to bear witness to the lives they stole. We tell them to remind ourselves of the fragility of life and the resilience of the human spirit. Think of the survivors. Think of the woman who stood up in court and told the Golden State Killer he was nothing. Think of the father who forgave Gary Ridgway. That is the true ending of this story. It is not the violence. It is the refusal to be defined by it. It is the strength to walk out of the darkness and into the light. As we close this file, take a moment to look around you. The world is a complex, beautiful, and terrifying place. The person sitting next to you on the bus has a story you will never know. The house at the end of the block holds secrets behind its curtains. We walk on a thin layer of ice, and beneath us is the deep, cold water. We are the chroniclers of the crack in the ice. We are the watchers in the night. Thank you for walking this dark road with me. Thank you for listening to the whispers of the abyss. The case files are closed. The evidence is boxed away. But the story never truly ends. It just waits for the next chapter to be written. This has been the True Crime Chronicles. I am your narrator. Stay safe, lock your doors, and remember, the scariest monsters are the ones that look just like us. Good night.